Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I am glad that you're with me. You could be anywhere. Bright and early this morning, 7:14 a.m. February, what is the date? February 25th? 26th. February 26th, 7:14 in the morning. Welcome to the show. I hope you guys are doing all right. Shout out to the chat. We have Skeptical Jerk. He is in the house. Rami, Wraith 36, Craig Wells, Deborah Wilson. Good morning, all of you. I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you guys are having a decent day, or I should say a decent morning. A lot of news, and some of that news is not great. I'll put it that way. The Republicans have agreed on the budget. They've agreed on the budget. I guess there's congratulations in that they were able to accomplish that. In the budget, they've decided what we need in this moment are tax cuts. That's what we need in this moment. Now, my take is they're Republicans, and so obviously that is going to be the bell that they hit. Social Security and Medicare seem to be off the table. So what they've seemed to go after, or seeming to plan to go after, is Medicare. They are talking about billion in cuts to Medicare. And they're doing this in order to make room for tax cuts for the top 1%. People with yachts, people with second houses, those folks, because those are the folks that are really in detriment and in need in this moment of our financial largesse as the U.S. government. Right here. This is a chart that goes into it. Now, they are trying to say $880 billion in Medicare cuts over the course of 10 years. $230 billion in cuts. Food stamps. So the capability of poor people to feed themselves is also under attack by the Republican Congress. Now, they are going to have to take this through budget reconciliation. And budget reconciliation is their way of trying to avoid basically amending the two bills from the House and from the Senate. The Senate seems to be more dubious about these kind of deep Medicaid cuts because they know they're going to get taken out in the very next election when they do that, because many of their constituents also are on Medicaid. Meaning, just because you wanted an end to the war, just because you believe liberals were out of their goddamn minds, doesn't mean you wanted your Medicaid cut, or that you have a relative that is not on Medicaid. That's not a racial issue. The majority of the poor people in this country are white. We only make up, meaning blacks, 13% of the country. So going after services is not going after a specific racial group. Yeah, we may need it more, because the poverty may be deeper. But if you're talking about the majority of people in the country, they're just making ends meet. Going after Medicaid, going after SNAP benefits is also going after members of your own base, which is treacherous for Republicans to do. They always overstep. And so the catch becomes, are they going to be able to do this? And not just are they going to be able to do it. No tax on tips, by the way, is not in this. I keep seeing online people saying Donald Trump added no taxes on tips. That is not in this bill. Meaning one of the big items that was going to go directly, let's say, to the poorest of this country. It's not in the bill. Could they add it later? Yes. Is it there now? No. And so many of the people who are saying it's there, they're lying or they're getting it wrong. This may have consequences to them. This may have consequences to them. Yes, it's going to kill people. It will kill people, because if you're cutting benefits to a medical faculty, then people are not going to be able to get that medical faculty. And it's not like Medicaid is balling in and of itself. I mean, when my grandmother was ill, she was getting Medicaid. We had to put out money for nurses. We had to put out money for all of those things, because those things were not necessarily covered by Medicaid. And you're not talking about families that are rich. Medicaid is often used for the people who are the poorest. So obviously, this notion that a billionaire is going to somehow save you is nonsense. That being said, each year we spend like $2 trillion over what we bring in. So each year under the Biden administration, it was like $2 trillion over what we were bringing in as a country. We were adding to the debt. Trump, when he was in office, increased the deficit by like $9 trillion. If you remember, under Obama, the Republicans were like, we're not going to increase the deficit. We're not going to increase the debt ceiling. We're not going to do any of that. I'm not going to put another red cent on my grandbabies' coffers. And then the moment that Donald Trump wins, $9 trillion increase to the debt ceiling. All right. So they're doing all of this in order to get savings so they can give tax cuts to the richest in the country. That's what they're doing. When Democrats are saying that, the Democrats are not wrong. If I play a clip of AOC pointing that out, AOC is not wrong to point it out. Bernie Sanders is not wrong to point it out. I take no issue with them pointing it out. They're absolutely, perfectly, and completely correct. They're completely correct. The issue is the issue of substance, as I've pointed out before. You can make an argument to me that is entirely relative to who you're talking about, which says nothing about what you actually stand for. And that's the issue. It's this lack of anything under it. There's no there to it. When they were in power, they weren't necessarily doing anything to forward the cause. If anything, they were just a holding pattern. I'm saying it's one thing to make an argument to me that Trump is an ogre. Okay, fair enough, I accept that. It's another thing to represent something in opposition to that ogre that has a value set that is substantive, that the public knows what that is. Those are different things. I hope you understand my point. AOC came out attacking this bill, as she should. As she should. Right here. My thing is, what they fundamentally miss is that you need to be something. People need to be able to define you. They need to be able to have some sense of, okay, where is this person actually, or are they purely just opposition? Opposition is fine, but there should be substance under that opposition. This is AOC going after Republicans for this bill.
But that's the argument, right? But if that were true, then one would think that the so-called cost savings from certain wasteful cuts would be reinvested in Medicaid. However, that is not what the committee is proposing. They are proposing that we have cuts to these essential programs in order to pay for Elon Musk's tax breaks. The order has come down to this committee. Find $880 billion. Find it for what? To pay for a tax cut bill that benefits tax cuts on yachts and private jets and billionaires.
Her point is so right. Her point is so right. Because it's one thing to say, all right, we have waste, fraud, and abuse. Fair enough. I think everyone accepts that. You're talking about a program that's in the trillions. So let's do something about the waste, fraud, and abuse. Again, let's do that. No issue. We are on the same page. However, instead of taking the waste, fraud, and abuse and putting it back into the program in order to extend benefits for people, who need those benefits, let's take that waste, fraud, and abuse and give it in a tax cut to some billionaire or millionaire. Let's do that. That's the good idea. That's the plan that we're going to go with. It's like, okay, dude, are you serious? Are you being serious right now? She's right. Her point is right. I take no issue with her point. I take issue with the politics that's coming out of Democrats. It is grotesque to take from the poorest to give to the richest. Full stop. I understand that the rich won't agree with that. I understand that from their point of view, well, we pay the most taxes. I get all that. You are doing well. You are balling. Enjoy your life. Stop stealing from the worst and the poorest of this country. It's that. It's that. Hakeem Jeffries, waste of space that he is. Hakeem Jeffries is bitching about groups lefties, progressives, people who find themselves ostensibly on the left, whatever that means, that they spend more time going after him than they do going after Trump. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't like that. He takes issue with that. Now, there have been clips floating around of Hakeem Jeffries just doing trash interviews. The interview with Jon Stewart was trash. Him going on CNN, effectively saying, "What do you want me to do? We've lost everything," was trash. This interview with Stephen A. Smith fits within the mode of the trash that Hakeem Jeffries has been putting out. I have not watched this entire clip, in full honesty. So this would be a reaction to the clip. I've seen parts of it. I can't believe this is the guy who they chose as the avatar, the tip of the spear for the Democratic Party. I just can't fathom it. It is shocking to me that you lose to Trump in a populist election, mind you. Meaning Trump ran as a populist. Yes, on the right, but as a populist. You lost to a blue-collar billionaire who was able to take the working class. And your response to that is Jeffries. Jeffries is your response to that. That's mind-blowing. It should be mind-blowing. When Jon Stewart presses Jeffries and says, "Hey, it seems that you guys have gotten away from your New Deal politics. You know, is there any infrastructure?" To get back to that, Stewart pressing him saying, "Hey, I'm trying to help you out. The New Deal, you lost a populist election. Maybe you need to get back to those populist policies. Maybe, as opposed to divvying people up by their race and sex, that you can focus on the economic realities of everybody." Talking to me as a Democrat and as a black person, meaning you being a Democrat, I'm as a black person. And your response to me is, "We're going to do stuff on jail reform." First, I think that's racist. Two, why are you divvying up people in this way? If I'm dealing with people's economic realities, whether you're black, white, gay, straight, Asian, whatever, you have a house note, you may have a car note, you have to get from point A to point B, you have to get to your job, you have to pay for your kid. All of these things are just realities that exceed and surpass any notion of identity. That's the bell to ring. Because that bell brings all of these people together, all of them in unison, regardless of their racial distinctions or whatever else. It focuses on something that unites us all. We have to pay for our life. We have to survive. They are not doing that. They didn't do that. They didn't go in that direction during the election. They're not going in that direction. Now, Hakeem Jeffries is doubling down on stupid. And when he is pressed on this, he is fundamentally missing the fact that people are going after him because of his deficits. He doesn't quite get it. The only boat moving to contest Trump and whatever Donald Trump is doing on the domestic sense, or for that matter, international, but I actually like what he's doing internationally. What he's doing domestically is an opposition party. And so who else would you complain to? Who else would you bitch about? Who else would you scream at? You've lost on a massive fucking level. You got to own it. Like, why are you shocked that you're being heckled and harassed when you go out to these events? I get it. You're in a bubble. You are liberal. You know, oh my God, I can't believe people are yelling at me. Yeah, I believe I can imagine it's discombobulating. Fair enough. You took that job. I didn't take that job. You took that job. You made the choice that you wanted to be leader of the House. You made the choice that you wanted to be leader of the Democratic Party. Okay, your party just lost to a guy who they consider a monster. What do? What is your opposition? The people who are yelling at you because you are their opposition to that, who they would consider to be a monster. It's not shocking. It makes all the sense in the world. I'm shocked because you're shocked by the fact that people are yelling at you. Or for that matter, yelling at the party, saying, "What happened to you? What happened to you? Where's the party? What do you represent? What do you stand for? Why can't you put up an argument? Why can't you beat a billionaire in a populist race and you're supposedly representing the Democratic Party? You are one of the figureheads. Why are you shocked that people are yelling at you?" Hakeem Jeffries goes on the show, and again, we're going to be watching this together. Says this.
Well, listen, the extreme left protest me more than they protest Donald Trump. Because I mean, literally, wherever I go. So I think in part because I've declined, I've refused, I've chosen not to bend the knee to either people on the far left and certainly not to Donald Trump. And
What does that even mean? What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. I was having a conversation yesterday. I was talking to my ex, and after I got off the phone call, the people around me who heard part of the phone call heard me say "ish," like I said something like "we're friend-ish," because I was trying to be more honest in my language. You can say friend, but what does that really mean? The modifier "ish" is added to it because language is imprecise. I'm trying to be honest. They're looking at me as just being a guy. I'm not just being a guy. I'm just trying to be more honest about what that looks like in practice. Language is imprecise by definition. If you say something, it was a nice day. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Yeah, I know you enjoyed your day, but what does it mean? I don't know what it means. I can't get into your mind. I can't get into your feels for it. When Jeffrey says stuff like, well, I am not bending the knee to the far left, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. I don't know how they define the quote unquote far left. Is that Bernie Sanders? Is that AOC? Is that somebody like me? Is that somebody else on the who is this esoteric far left that Hakeem Jeffries is standing his ground against and refusing to bend the knee over? What are the policies of that? Because look, I do not know what a person means when they say stuff like this. If you tell me I have fought against XYZ policy, fair enough. I get that. That is clear. But this mythical, and mythical is not right, this monstrosity of a far left that he is talking about, I don't know what that means to him. I don't know what that means to him. I know what it means to me when I think of far left. I don't know what it means to him, which again leaves me with a bit of, unclarity about what Jeffries is trying to communicate. Or I get what he's trying to communicate, but it leaves me unclarity of I need the policies. Telling me the far left, I don't know what that means. That's entirely relative to your own political disposition. If Jeffrey's saying, I fought against Medicare for all, okay, fair enough, I get that. I understand what that means. If Jeffrey tells me I fought for transgender kids, okay, again, I understand what that means. I hope you get my point. His non-specificity doesn't help me in understanding what he's trying to communicate. And this idea of him fighting the far left, I don't know what that means. I just don't. I would go further. His issue is not the far left, at the very least in an economic sense. That is his gateway out. That is the way in order to bring huge numbers of people together in unison because all of them are getting something out of it, as opposed to whatever the hell he means by far left. I'm going to let him finish. Like I said, I haven't watched this entire video. Maybe he defines it later. I'll go back a bit.
in part because I've declined, I've refused, I've chosen not to bend the knee to either people on the far left and certainly not to Donald Trump and the far right. We all have a responsibility to serve the people we were elected to represent and the country and the Constitution. And
He has the charisma of a damp rag. Even the way he talks, it's like he has Asperger's. And I don't mean, God, that sounds so bad. He is not the best communicator. I'll just say it that way. He comes across robotic. He sounds weird. He looks strange when he's giving this delivery. I don't mean to trash Jeffries, but fuck it. We're here. I'm trashing Jeffries. This can't be the guy that you're putting up in this moment. It cannot be the guy. It can't be him. It can't be him. This can't be the guy. He can't be the guy. He's weird. He's awkward. He's strange. He doesn't communicate well. It can't be him. It can't be Jeffries. I'm sorry. It can't be Jeffries. Yes, I get it. Jeffries is their guy. It can't be him. It just can't be him. I can't believe that. See, Look, I'm African American, obviously. I have my biases, despite the fact that I find myself perched at the edge of the world. And I try to fix myself on the moon as I watch the stuff. But I'm a person. I have my biases. When they say stuff like, diversity is our strength, and I look at Jeffries, and I say, no, it's not. I'm sorry, that sounds horrible. My point is that you try to find the best person for the job. Jeffries is not that guy. Jeffries is not that guy. And I know that they picked Jeffries out of some sense of he's younger, he's a person of color, let's put him in the spot. He's not that guy. He is not the person for this position. He has no enthusiasm in the way that he gets anything across. You fall asleep listening to him. He comes across odd and robotic. And nothing of this leaves you to this idea of, yeah, let's go rally the troops. It's, oh my God, this is the guy that you got rallying the troops. This is appalling. This is appalling. Yeah, dude, you're getting heckled. Yeah, you're getting heckled. I don't have anything else to add to it.
And I certainly have not been bashful and will not be bashful in disagreeing with people who are trying to take this country in a direction that doesn't lift everybody up, whether that comes from the right or whether that comes from the far left. Well, listen, the extreme left protests me more than they protest Donald Trump.
I don't understand what that means. Like, what part? And again, I feel the need to parse this up because of the way Democrats have muddied the language on this. If I am Hillary Clinton, pretend I have a vagina, and I say, all right, I need to get $1 billion. That's what I need. I need $1 billion. I need millions of dollars in a Twitter army. I need millions of dollars in a Facebook army. I need to get $1 billion. All right. That $1 billion, I believe, will help me win the race. Okay, fair enough. Not a bad plan, not a bad strategy. How do you get the $1 billion? All right, well, I'm running for president. And in running for president, people are going to give me money because they're going to want things. All right, the people who want things, the people with the means, with the money, are not going to care about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They're going to be against increasing minimum wage because they are the 1%. This is adversely affecting their earnings. They're going to be against tax cuts. They're going to be against those things. So what can I actually run on as a Democrat? Taking on this mantle of FDR. Oh, I know. Identity. People are going to fight hard for their identity because it's their identity. If you're black, white, gay, straight, trans, whatever you are, you're going to fight for that because any attack on that is a direct attack on you. Fair enough. So let's just use that. And let's add a sprinkling of things on the side that are negligible for most people. But we are going to run on, A, it's my turn because I'm a woman and we should have a woman president. We haven't had one before, so I should be that first person. And 2, I'm going to use identity as my way of dealing with groups in order to give them something that they want to defend without necessarily having a financial component associated with the fact that they need to defend these things. I get the money. I get the group support. The world is great. I'm going to win the race. You lose that race. You lose that race. You get your $1 billion. You follow through with your plan. You're not an economic populist at all. You're the most establishment candidate that I think we've ever had. And you lose that race. Kamala Harris comes up, does the exact same thing. It was almost as if she's like, Hillary's playbook. Perfect. Fails miserably. Loses the race. To a billionaire that ran as a populist. That is astonishing. That is astonishing. You're the Democratic Party. You are supposed to be the vanguard of the working class. That is your job. That is your role. That is your political function in our political system. And you lost to a billionaire. What are you doing? What are you doing wrong? What are you doing? And after losing to that billionaire, your guy that you come out with to fight is this guy. It's this guy. That's the guy who's carrying the fight. That's the guy who's carrying the fight. The point I'm making is very basic. There is a fundamental contradiction in the way Democrats operate, the way they fund their campaigns, and the things that they push for. How are you the vanguard of the working class while also being completely obsequious to billionaires giving you cash in order for you to operate? How does that work? And I'm not saying that I want this kind of unilateral disarmament. What I'm saying is that you should go after the levers that are adversely affecting your ability to function as a political party. If those levers are, we need to stop billionaires from being able to donate to campaigns, then that's what you go after. Because that is the thing that is holding back your capability of getting elected and your capability of having a race that is in your, let's say, best interest, or at the very least, a race that is in that where you have an advantage. If you are stuck in a process where people can give unlimited amounts of money to campaigns, and you are a lefty, or supposedly want to be a lefty, you're going to lose. It's not that you can't win. It's more so that there is a ridiculous amount of money that can be dumped into campaigns to take you out if you allow that money to be dumped into campaigns. I'm saying break the planks, break the levers that allows that process to take place. Why are you running in a race as a supposed Democrat that is supposed to be believing in the working class and fighting for the working class, while you are completely sucking on the tit of the wealthiest of the country that don't want those things, and that is antagonistic to that same working class? It makes no sense. But this is the guy. They see nothing wrong. They want to keep this model going. It's shocking that Jeffries is the guy who they're using. Just shocking. Frank Friel, Dark Brandon broke the railroad strike. Yep, I remember that. I like Cal, but he also said Jon Stewart should run for president. Tom. I like Jon Stewart. I don't hate Jon Stewart. I have no issue with Cal either. Look, you're not going to agree with everybody on everything, right? It's just life. Jon Stewart is going to hit some things that I think is going to be great. He's going to hit some things I think is going to be wrong. That is the beauty of Jon Stewart, to be honest. It's not a weakness of Jon Stewart, for my take. Him running for president, not so much. Would I back him if he did? Probably yes. Probably yes. Because Stewart is the same guy that had that question to Hakeem Jeffries about, hey, maybe you guys need to get back to New Deal politics. I believe that's true. That it needs to be substance under it. It can't just be entirely reflexive against Trump. Oh, we don't like Trump. We get that. You spent 3-4 years telling us how much you hated Trump. We get that. We get it. Everybody gets it. Everybody understands it. Everybody and their mama understands that the Democratic Party hates Trump. That's great. What are you? What are you? And until you can tell me that, you have no value to me. You have no value. I want to point out something else. John Oliver. What the actual hell? He is on his show arguing for censorship. That's astonishing. How are you in media arguing for the censorship of other media? And I know Facebook, Twitter, these things aren't media, but they're used often as media. Even if they're getting it wrong, how are you, Jon Stewart, who believes Trump is Hitler and is going to get rid of all of these press people, have, put people against the wall, shoot in the back of the head? How are you, John Oliver, making an argument for censorship? What the hell? Hey, Brit, do you know what country you're in? How about that? Let's start there. This is Stewart making this case. And to be clear, Britain has no First Amendment. Europe has no First Amendment. It was the reason why they were able to eliminate RT, Sputnik, pretty much any opposition media that they didn't necessarily want to hear overnight, instantly. They have no First Amendment. In Germany, you could be arrested for posting something online. There's another guy that I was watching, Richard Medhurst, was literally arrested in Vienna for his commentary on the issue of Gaza and Palestine. There is no First Amendment in those countries. Vance, when he gave that speech, lambasted them for what they were doing in regards to censorship. And here we have a Brit giving an American show saying, hey, the Brits, we got it more right. We're censor content anytime we want to censor content. Dude, I think you're missing the boat. This is John Oliver making his case for. What do you mean you never heard about it? What do you mean you never heard about it? I'm gonna let him finish, but okay, let's see where he's going with this. Clear. New York Post came out with that story. Twitter censored that story and put New York Post account, New York Post, in Twitter jail. He's hiding the ball. He is so hiding the ball. This is so aggravating. He's hiding the ball. What I mean by he's hiding the ball, it's more complicated than that. In fact, it's a lot more complicated than that. If you remember, all of this was taking place when all of this was occurring. Trump and Biden were running in the election. Joe Biden was going for the debate. Trump and Joe Biden were going into the debate. Trump was going to use the Hunter Biden laptop story to point out corruption that was taking place with the Bidens and Ukrainian money, Chinese money, all of this money that Hunter Biden was effectively getting. Not to mention the humiliation of being in a bathtub smoking crack or measuring the number of M&Ms you can get on your penis. That, as a man, is impressive. He gets my credit for that. The other stuff, not so much. Hooking up with porn stars or adult workers, all those things. It's humiliating. I have zero issue with him doing so. It's just humiliating. But it's the financial issues that were more to the point of problematic for Joe Biden and the deals, what seemed to be Hunter Biden using the political leverage of his dad in order to make deals. It is obvious. It is clear as day. Just because Joe Biden is good at avoiding the corruption charge doesn't mean it's not corruption. You're using your name for leverage, or your kid is using your name for leverage in order to make deals all across the world. It was clear as day. Joe Biden did not want that story out. The mainstream media that was backing Trump did not want that story out. In 2019, the FBI knew that the laptop was real, and yet they still went with this idea of this is Russian disinformation. Then you got Antony Blinken getting the 51 intelligence officials to come forward to say, we believe this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. Okay, they lied. They knew they were lying. They did so entirely in order to allow Joe Biden an argument in the debate. John Oliver, whether he knows this or not, is almost irrelevant to the point. He's hiding the ball. The laptop story was damaging. And if Trump could have used that in a debate, it is unclear how the election would have turned out because there's no way to know counterfactuals. It is a bit rich that John Oliver is making this argument that censoring the laptop was somehow good, somehow a great thing, somehow a process of working to the benefit of America, when if given that information, would America have made a different choice? I don't have an answer for that. And the fact that I don't have the answer for that is problematic in and of itself. The American electorate gets the information that it gets. It makes its choice on that information, imperfect or otherwise. In this situation, this was not imperfect. The laptop was the laptop. It was, or it did indicate that Hunter Biden was leveraging Joe Biden's name for financial largesse. Trump being, his argument with the laptop being inoculated by media organizations saying, this is Russian disinformation, this is going to be hidden, this is going to be blocked, this is going to be avoided, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. Call it what it is. That same laptop was used in the prosecution of Hunter Biden. Meaning the feds, when they were going after Hunter Biden, if you remember, they started using elements of the laptop as a way of prosecuting Hunter Biden. I have no idea what Oliver is saying here. At the very least, he's not being soon after. They were in Twitter jail. All of the media was reporting that they believed it was Russian disinformation. Let's be honest about that. It wasn't like, oh, the story was just floating out there. Nobody really paid attention to the story. And after a week or after a few days, they just let it go. That is not the way that turned out. That was done explicitly just before the election. Like, this is the time scale matters. This was taking place during the election between Trump and Biden. The moment that the election is over with, it doesn't matter if the story comes out at that point. The timescale has already passed. The timescale was the election itself. So again, Oliver is acting like, this is just random moments. These things are untethered to anything else. No, these things were tethered directly to the election between Trump and Joe Biden. Just saying. Really? Really? Joe Biden has been doing politics for 47 years, 48, if not longer. Let's say 50 years, round it off. Are you telling me that Joe Biden, who's been doing politics for 50 years, doesn't know when his kid is using his name for leverage in order to get deals? When that email came out where Hunter Biden was talking to a Chinese businessman, and he said, you give me $20 million or else everybody that me and my father have come in contact with will be against you going forward. I'm paraphrasing, but that's effectively what the email said. Okay, nobody gives a shit if Hunter Biden feels some kind of way. Who cares? Well, a crackhead is mad at me, so what? Right? Joe Biden, who is in politics, who Hunter Biden added in that conversation, well, you may care about that. Joe Biden is going to be president. Joe Biden is already president. Joe Biden is going to have political influence. I may feel some kind of way about him feeling some kind of way about it. I don't care about Hunter Biden. There's a reason that Hunter Biden said, I'm sitting here with my father. He's invoking Joe Biden in order to make it clear my dad is in on this. Are you telling me that somebody who's been doing politics for 50 years doesn't know what that is? Now, just because you can't get him legally with it is secondary to the point of whether or not it's corruption. It's corruption. It is. John, God, man, like fucking liberals. Like, John, it's frustrating to me because I feel like I don't have a political home. Maybe that's where my frustration comes in. I enjoyed during the Sanders campaign where it felt like all of these people were in unison fighting for something good, for something right, moving the world to something better. Whether true, in fact, whether it was only in my mind, fair enough, I love the feeling associated with it. That is not the feeling that I have right now. The feeling I have right now is liberals have lost their minds, Republicans are batshit crazy. I have no home either place. In one sense, John Oliver makes this argument, and it's like, dude, how are you continuously absolving the Democratic Party and liberals of blame for stuff that they should be blamed for? The Hunter Biden laptop is egregious. And the idea that you're trying to yada yada, paper, everything is great is nonsense. And then using this in an argument for censorship on Facebook is, again, nonsense. Who chooses? Who chooses? You get a Democratic administration that is so fervently into war that they literally take my show off the air. And not just take my show off the air, it's pushing social media companies to go after accounts that are critical of the U.S. position in a war that A, should have never happened, B, nearly a million people have lost their lives, and C, liberals seem to love. Even more so since Trump is trying to end it. Who chooses? Who chooses? The fact that the federal government would try to Bigfoot something like that when the entire job and role of the press is to point out when the government is overreaching is egregious. Censorship. Like, it's that part. It's one thing if you had a government, a society, corporate culture that you trusted, that was honest, that was looking out for the benefit of the overall. That's not our world. And because it's not our world, the notion that the government is going to be an honest arbiter, or that Facebook, Twitter are going to be honest arbiters, that they're going to be like, we are only going to give you information that's true. Okay, what does it mean for information to be true? Like, all of that stuff comes into play immediately when you start getting into this kind of censorship thing that Oliver is pushing for, and that liberals in general have pushed for, believing that they no longer can win in a battle of ideas, oddly enough, against their opposition. So they want censorship. Frustrating. That's all. Just frustrating. Right here, Charles Messina. Oh, somebody's gonna take the piss out of me. You threw your hand in with Russian news. Therefore, all of the supplicating to Trump to the world will not get you back to Sputnik. I think I've said it before. What I care about is the war to end. That's the idea that hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives is atrocious to me. So I start there. Would I want my job back? Obviously. Supplicating to Trump has nothing to do with it. I want the war to stop. My position has been straight all the way through. I have not deviated from that position. This is a catastrophe. This never needed to happen. This should have never happened. All of these people are losing their lives for no reason. My position hasn't budged, changed, altered in any way at all. I feel you, Messina, but I've been an honest actor. Charles Black Spot, yes. Shout out to Rami. Papo Nala Naya Shelley. It's never vote party again. Only my interests. MAGA. Oh, MAGA's not my interest. MAGA's not my interest. MAGA's not my interest. Look, just because one sucks doesn't mean the other is great. It just doesn't. If you end the war, yes, good. Everything else is trash. Everything else is trash. Look, I didn't come into the Trump term thinking, oh, this is going to be great. And Scott Ritter saying that the revolution is here. No, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. These guys are going to fleece the country raw. I mean, the $880 billion theft of Medicare is example of that. The $240 billion that they're going to steal from food stamps is evidence of that. They are going to give ungodly tax cuts. Well, for one, they're going to extend Donald Trump's tax cuts. And even when they're talking about the no tax on tip stuff, okay, that's like $31 trillion over 10 years. A, Trump threw that out. B, it's not in the budget that they're proposing. C, I don't even know if I'd be that much against it, just because it's at the very least helping the least of us. But let's be very clear, though. Trump is cutting taxes for the rich. He will most likely raise them for you and I. Let's be very clear on that point. This is not equal tax cut. The dollar that you get is not compensation for the $1 million that the other guy got. And it's not compensation for the other tax hole that was closed that you were benefiting from as a poor person, that person is not making extra money off. It's not an equal exchange. It's not a balance act. They are raping America blind. Doge is just one example of that, going after Medicare or Medicaid, leaving Social Security and Medicare alone. I suspect he did that because, all things being equal, he lives in Florida. He said he wasn't going to go after it during the election. And there will be consequences for it. But, as I pointed out, there may be consequences for him going after Medicaid also. We'll see. We will see. Mr. Ripley. Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Hunter Biden was useful because he was compromised. The Ukrainian criminal element could trust him. The Democrats used him in an operation to provoke Russia. I don't know if they used Hunter Biden to provoke Russia. I mean, the expansion of NATO to the border, the offering of NATO in 2008 at the Bucharest summit, that is a provocation. Hunter Biden is just a grifter who was making money in any particular way he could, using his dad's name for leverage in order to make that money. The money that he was able to get from Ukraine was a direct result of Hunter Biden, or let's say Vice President Joe Biden being vice president, and Ukraine wanting an end to the U.S. administration. Hunter Biden being that gateway, or at the very least they might have thought he was going to be that gateway. So I don't think he was a provocation to any kind of war. I think he was mostly just trying to maximize his profit. How can I get as much money as I can? How can I use my dad's name to do that? Oh, hey, I don't know anything about Ukraine. I don't know anything about oil and gas, but I'm a smart guy. I could do this. They're paying me $80,000 a month. It's that. It's that. It's not trivial, but I don't think it started a war. I said it that way. Yeah, I don't think it started a war. Charles Messina, Scott Ritter served. Yes, Scott Ritter served in the U.S. military. He was a weapons inspector. He broke with the Bush administration when he realized they were trying to start a war, not end a war, in which case he got all sorts of hell or pressure for doing so. No, so Ritter, I like Ritter because he's bullish, if that makes sense. Like, each person who comes on the show gives a different take, which is good. I like it. I don't want it to be an echo chamber. I want these different points of view because it informs my own point of view. Svoboda is far more cynical, measured in the way that he taught it. I strongly believe that 3 a.m. between him and his God, he's hopeful that this blows over. Ritter is far more bullish about it. And you can see that bullishness when he comes on the show and he gives his commentary and gives his take. I think he may be a bit too bullish on some of this, even though a lot of his take has been correct. The part I think he's too bullish on is this idea that Elon Musk and Trump represents the revolution. I think that's insane. That is way too putting it well. Like, this is the best picture of this that you can give it. And I think the picture is incorrect. Musk is a billionaire. Musk has, $300 billion, some insane amount of money that Musk has at his disposal. The fact that Musk has that much money means that he cares about having that much money. It's not like he just fell out of bed and ended up with $300 billion. The government is the biggest trough of cash anywhere. And the US government at that is the biggest trough of cash in the world. Having this billionaire who knows nothing about these systems, knows nothing about the way government works, snipping through for the patina of some kind of governmental oversight is nonsense. I'm sorry, it's nonsense. And to use that in order, and look, it's good theater. It's good at showing, hey, we're going after waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah, but you're not really going after waste, fraud, and abuse. You're looking for ways in order to give yourself higher tax cuts without it being too visually damaging to an already bloated $36 trillion budget. That's what you're doing. It's just wild to me. I don't know. I understand that people want something to believe in. I get it. I do get it. It feels good. It's satisfying on some level. But this is not it. This is not it. Donald Trump got his mineral deal. Donald Trump got his mineral deal. We really need to put this in context. Like, we really need to put this in context. Ukraine is edged on by NATO to get into a war that it cannot win, but in a war that it believes that the US and the European countries, being the global powers that they are, will somehow prevail. They decide that they're going to go overthrow the government in 2014 under Yanukovych. Okay. The Minsk agreements are formed after Russia invades, but they get the Minsk agreements. At no point does Ukraine live up to the Minsk agreements because they didn't feel that they needed to, because the US and Europe was effectively telling them, you don't need to. Europe and the US starts dumping a heavy amount of money and military armaments into Ukraine to build up their military. This is according to Hollande, Angela Merkel, who effectively admitted that they lied in regards to the negotiations with Russia over the Minsk agreements. Ukraine criminalizes opposition political parties. They criminalize opposition media. They go on a killing spree and break away republics because, again, those republics broke away because Nazis effectively took control of the government. If Donald Trump, back during the Biden win, if Republicans found a way to put Trump in office and California says, we are not being a part of this government, this is no longer the United States of America, Trump didn't win, he is taking power in a coup, you may get states who pull out of the U.S. almost immediately as a result, in which case you may get the U.S. military going after those states in another civil war. I'm saying that is what was taking place in Ukraine. Russia eventually invades because Ukraine was effectively about to invade Donbass and go on another killing spree. They had already killed 14,000 effing Russian Ukrainians. They were going to go further. Russia invades. The Istanbul agreements are brought up almost immediately, within a few weeks. Both sides agree to the contours of those agreements. Boris Johnson comes in, scuttles the deal. Scuttles the deal with this idea of, look, we're the West. We're going to back you. We're going to beat them. We're going to put economic sanctions. We're going to destroy their economy. And you can beat them on a battlefield. And after you do that, you have now earned, in blood, your place in NATO. Zelensky immediately blows off the agreements, Istanbul agreements, and continues the war. Yada, yada, yada. 3 years later, with nearly 600,000 dead Ukrainians, this is where we are. With the President of the United States coming in, we are no longer with you for as long as it takes. It is no longer an unprovoked war of aggression. You, Zelensky, are a dictator. You lied to us. We need your mineral wealth. We need $500 billion in mineral wealth from you in this moment if you want to keep this war going. What the hell? So I've often asked this question. At some point, somebody is going to be walking out at night, looking at the stars, saying, what was this for? And so not only have you lost 20% of your territory, give or take, maybe 25%. Not only have you lost 600,000 Ukrainian human beings that are no longer a part of this world. Not only do you have all of these broken human beings that are with you, not only do you have millions of people that effectively fled the country, you now have the group, or at the very least, the president of the country that backed you in this escapade, shaking you down for 50% of your mineral wealth going forward. That includes oil, gas, that includes rare earth minerals, that includes all of it going forward. And Zelensky is going to come to DC on Friday, to sign on the dotted line saying, yes, you now have ownership for the development of all of these resources. Now, something can be said of, well, this is for future resources, and these things haven't necessarily been developed yet. And so will they ever be developed? And if they're never developed, then what is the point of this paper? If Trump is doing it, the fact that he's signing this over at all is rather astonishing. Donald Trump gets, at the very least, his paper win, because again, we don't know if these things are ever going to be developed. But then you also got Russia coming out saying, hey, by the way, we also have mineral wealth, and we have more mineral wealth than Zelensky, and the territories that we have taken also has mineral wealth, and maybe you can get that from us. So maybe you can also get a deal with us on these things if this is the thing that you care so much about. Now, as I pointed out, the deal between Ukraine and Russia is going to go beyond Ukraine. It has to. And the reason why it has to is because if you stick and stay with Ukraine, well, you fundamentally lost that war. You have no leverage in that contest. And so the conversation that you need to have, especially since the issue is not Ukraine for Trump, the issue is the dollar. We have $36 trillion in debt. We can do that because we're the reserve currency. The reserve currency is used all around the world for transactions, which means you need an excess of those dollars for you to even have the reserve currency. I hope that makes sense. Like if, let's say if all of the countries around the world, let's say 70%, 50% now, but let's say 55% of the countries around the world are using the dollar in their dealings amongst each other. Okay, well, we're also using dollars in the United States, which means you need to have a surplus of those dollars around the world in order for you to be able to use it at home, then be able to use it abroad. The world is great. So you are going to be running a deficit by definition. If you create a situation where countries stop using that dollar, you're still stuck with $36 trillion in debt. Meaning your ability to maneuver around that debt becomes less if indeed other countries around the world just stop using your product. By using the dollar as a weapon, we've incentivized countries to stop using the dollar. Trump sees it. From his point of view, we need to stop that. So when I say the issue about the war is less about Ukraine, it is less about Ukraine. They've lost. There's nothing that you can do if you limit your conversation to that. If you expand your conversation out to, let's talk trade deals. Let's get rid of sanctions. Let's give you $300 billion back. Let's talk about investment deals where you can come here and invest money into whatever. Okay, that's different. In that situation, Ukraine is just a plank on the board. It's not the board itself. I strongly suspect that that's what's happening. The idea, though, that that's happening and you have to pay for it is, I have no words. I have no words. If you are a Ukrainian who voted for Zelensky because you wanted him to stop the war, they end up in a war for 3 years that gets 600,000 people killed. Maybe even somebody in your family is injured, broken, or killed. And then on top of that, after losing territory, after losing all of these people, you now have to give up your mineral wealth. How do you feel in this moment? Was it worth it? Was it worth it? And go back to the Burns memo. Net means net. In fact, let me pull that memo up. I know I reference it, but the memo is just astonishing. So right here, William Burns, former director of the CIA under Joe Biden, wrote this memo in 2008 after the Bucharest summit, where NATO membership was extended to Ukraine. In the memo, he points out, and I want you to compare what he's saying in this memo to what they said after, when they kept using unprovoked war of aggression. Russia just wants to take over all of Europe. Vladimir Putin is just a madman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they engender serious concerns about the consequences of stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine Russia's influence in the region, but it also fears unpredicted and uncontrolled consequences which would seriously affect Russian security interests. Experts tell us that Russia is particularly worried that strong divisions in Ukraine over its NATO membership, with much of the ethnic Russian community against that membership, could lead to a major split involving violence or, at worst, civil war. It is that eventuality that Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to face. So Burns, prescient, you could even call him psychic, is pointing out, look, you are screwing around on the Russian border. They don't like this. And you're creating tensions in the country by the offer of NATO membership, something that was considered a red line because Ukraine was supposed to be neutral, like Austria. You're going to provoke a civil war. If you do, Russia will have to make a choice on whether to get involved or not, because this is happening on their border. This was in 2008. So this idea that, oh, golly gee, we had no idea that Russia was going to, get involved. We had no idea this was going to break apart into civil war. We had no idea that this was what, all of it was nonsense. All of it was lies. Russia's going to go all through Europe. All of it was nonsense. All of it was lies. Burns notes it even back in 2008. Even in 2008. I'm just pointing out, it never needed to happen. It was always understood to be a red line. They pushed that red line anyway. They understood that it was going to create all sorts of conflict within the context of the country. They pushed it anyway. They understood that Russia may get involved because this is happening on their border, because we get involved if it was happening on our border. They did it anyway. That's my point. They did it anyway. They understood that there could be massive ramifications for it. They didn't care about the ramifications. We get to stick it to Russia. They gave that speech to Zelensky. Zelensky signed on to it. 3 years later, here we are. Still in this stupid quagmire. And on top of it, he has to now pony up billions of dollars in mineral wealth of the country. Just amazing. Just outright amazing. I want to get to my guest. Oh, I thought my guest was here. I guess he'll come back. He will be back momentarily. Yeah, he'll be back momentarily. It's just amazing, man. I get it. In full transparency, obviously, it sucks that I got fired for the network being in opposition to the Biden administration. I was deeply bothered by the fact that this was a modern war. And what I mean by that is it's not a skirmish. It's not drones clipping each other. We're talking about human beings losing their lives with industrial warfare. Tanks, drones, planes, missiles. I mean, fuck, the Oreshnik by itself is terrifying. All of these things are being used to break apart and destroy human beings, and are doing so very effectively, especially on the Russian side. It is shocking to me that more people are not against that. My only framing of it, that they're not against it, is because they hate Trump. And the fact that Trump is trying to end it, then by definition, he's wrong for doing so, because he's Trump. But those people don't seem to be living in reality to me. A, you're losing, so there's that. B, the ability for Ukraine to resist is getting weaker over time, not stronger. What is your out in this? They have no answers for any of those in real terms, short of platitudes about holding the line and being strong and protecting democracies. That sounds nice. That sounds very childish. Reality is different, and you're stuck with the realities on the ground. The reality on the ground is you've lost. You've lost. I want to bring in my guests. I'm joined with the man himself, Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin is a speaker, writer, journalist, and political analyst. Caleb, what is your organization, one more time? It's Center for American Progress? That's not right. Center for Political Innovation.
Yes, the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org. That's us.
Center for Political Innovation. Excellent. You guys had a recent meetup in Minneapolis, correct?
We did.
How? Wait, give me 1 second.
Sure thing.
Well, yeah, how did it go? Did it go well?
It went very well, and there was a little twist. Can't say too much about it, but keep an eye on my YouTube channel because a video.
What do you mean you can't say too much about it? You can't do that. You can't pick the audience.
I don't want to give too much away. Let me put it that way. But it was more exciting than usual. Let me put it that way. But it still went very, very well. And keep an eye on my YouTube channel. There'll be a video that drops probably later today. Peter Coffin and I were out there, and it went very well. Great crew of folks. Lots of new people. Our workshop was all new people practically. And we had some important discussions. We were then in the streets of Minneapolis the next day. We unfurled a very big banner that had Putin and Trump shaking hands. It said, "We support peace talks and Ukraine war." We got a very positive response from the people driving by on the streets of Minneapolis. Thumbs up, honking their horns, waving. It was a great event, and we got to, it was neat because there were people who'd never heard these kinds of politics who came to our event. There was a woman who's a waitress at a very popular restaurant. There was a guy who owns a window cleaning company. There was a student from Duluth who drove about 2 hours to be there. Wow. It was just a really diverse group of people. There was a guy who is 80 years old. He was the son of communists. His parents were in the Communist Party, and he'd been a lifelong peace activist. He was 80 years old. He watches my YouTube channel, and he thought he wanted to be there as well. So it was quite a diverse group of people, to say the least.
That's really good.
Yeah, and we had a great time, honestly. And keep an eye out because it was not without some, shall we say, fireworks, but it all worked out. So keep an eye on my YouTube channel because we're releasing video of some of the exciting stuff that happened throughout the workshop. Let me put it that way. But
Fair enough.
It went very well. So
fair enough. You're not going to tell us. I'm not going to push. Fair enough.
You'll see in due time. Give it a couple hours. We want you to see it on our terms. Let's say it.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I accept that. Give me your overall take on this geopolitical shift that has taken place, what I would consider to be an earthquake in regards to U.S. relations with Russia. And just to dig into this, yesterday at the UN General Assembly, the U.S. and Russia effectively agreed on one of the resolutions that was far more neutral in regards to the war. Now, European powers were eventually able to add in language to that, but put that to the side. When it got to the UN Security Council, the resolution that the U.S. put forward initially went through. Europe abdicated. Basically, they didn't make a vote. They absconded. It's not absconded. They abstained. So the resolution that went through the UN Security Council, which is, has effective law, it's the thing that matters per se, is effectively the joint resolution that the United States and Russia agreed on against the Europeans. So it's not just Trump doing stuff in theater sense. He is actually taking steps to set a framing and a context to end the war, and not just end the war, to normalize relations with Russia. How do you evaluate this geopolitical shift? Like, give us some context on this. Like, I'm fascinated by what is taking place. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think you can put it in the context of a couple key trends that we're all aware of. The first of which is that, the main driving force behind the war against Russia has been mainstream media. Mainstream media has been beating the drum that, the Russian president is somehow a dictator, despite being overwhelmingly popular and elected in internationally observed elections. But he's a dictator, and you have to hate Russia, and Russia's trying to take over the world, even though they're not. even though they did everything they could to avoid even going into Ukraine at the current moment. So the idea they're trying to take over the world is absurd, but it's been mainstream media outlets that have been the main driver of the hysteria against Russia. And you'll notice the mainstream media are also the very same people that have been telling us that Donald Trump is a dictator, that Donald Trump is literally Hitler, that if Donald Trump gets back into office, we're all going to die and the earth is going to burst into flames and we're all going to lose our civil liberties. The American people have largely rejected mainstream media. They voted for Donald Trump after hearing that he was a person on podcasts and hearing him explain and speak to the issues that are important to them and oppose mainstream media and its narratives, which are increasingly out of touch with what Americans want. And not surprisingly, Donald Trump is now in office and he's shifting U.S. foreign policy away from the mainstream media narrative of events. And he seems to be pivoting toward better relations with Russia. Now, I would like to see, I guess I will breathe easier when a peace deal is actually signed, when the war is over. So I'm holding my breath, so to speak. You know, it ain't over until it's over. And this all sounds nice and very friendly gestures are being made. And, you know, I understand about the minerals and Ukraine and all of that, but I want this war to actually stop, right? I don't want this to just be kind of a false start, but this is what the American people voted for. And this is against that globalist establishment that the European Union is very much part of, that the NATO alliance is very much part of. The American people have rejected that. The German people have rejected that at the polls. We don't want to be ruled by huge international multinational corporations. We don't want to carry out a globalist agenda of going against any country that opposes them. And it seems like there's a layer of people in Germany who just want wealth for Germans, and they just want the German economy to get stronger. There seems to be a layer of people in Britain who were not so concerned about the European Union and all of that. They just wanted wealth for British people, and they wanted to make some money in Britain. And it seems like here in America, we have the same thing. There's a layer of people that are not so concerned about carrying out this agenda of spreading human rights and regime change and all of that. They're more concerned about just making more money here in America. Now, I'm not sure how well it's going to work out. If you dismantle the federal government, you get rid of lots of good paying government jobs. That money gets taken out of the economy. But
Yes.
we certainly have to see how these things go. And I'm waiting for something permanent. You know, I really like seeing the USA vote in nice ways at the United Nations and stuff. But I want to see the war actually end. I want to see an actual peace deal. I want to see where that border is going to be. I want to see an agreement. And when I see that, I'll breathe a lot easier. But all of it looks good right now. This seems to be what the American people want. It's what Russia wants. It's what the German people want. It's what the bulk of the people want. And it's against the increasingly detached agenda of some very, very powerful elites that are fuming with rage that they're not getting what they want, and they're beating with their chest loudly. But this is what global opinion wants. People want peace. People want what they called in Cold War terms détente. People want détente.
Agreed. I think the overwhelming, Europe is finding itself to be more and more isolated, the more rabid they become. And when you get America pushing, saying, hey, let's end this. And the rest of the world is like, yes, let's end this. And then Europe is like, no, we want to keep this going. Okay, they're out of step with mainstream in their own populations, not just around the world. What is being touted as something that Trump said that goes against this notion of peace, which I don't think it does, but I want to get your take on it. This came out where Trump was talking about the mineral deal, and they were effectively saying, look, what is Zelensky getting for the deal? This was Trump's response.
Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, and military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time.
Some people are taking that to come away with the assessment that Donald Trump is saying, well, we're going to keep the war going. That's not what I really heard, though. What I heard out of that was, look, we gave them $350 billion. $350 billion is the number that Donald Trump says that we gave them, whether it's true or not. That's the number that he has always used when he's been talking about Ukraine and the money that we effectively gave him. So it sounds like he's saying effectively, look, we already gave them all of this money for the mineral wealth. And look, Trump has a vested interest in Ukrainian military fighting on. If they fall and collapse on the battlefield, your ability to negotiate anything about that war is over with. And so give me a take on this. I've seen some people complain bitterly that Trump is going back on his word, that he lied. That's not what I got out of that statement, but what is your take?
Well, I think what you're seeing, there are way too many people, especially in our spheres, that are just very determined to say, "Oh, it's all over. No, 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 nothing's going to happen. It's just going to stay bad." You know, and I think of this, you know, the Homer Simpson cartoon, you know, old man yells at cloud. You know, there's a lot of people that are just kind of, that's what they want to reduce themselves to, and they're desperate for anything they can point to say, "Oh, there's no hope." Look, I have said to you here, it ain't over till it's over, right? And I want to see this war actually end. And I'm not declaring victory until we can actually see this war ended. And this war actually does need to end. I like everything I'm hearing with regards to Russia from the new administration. Absolutely. I'm very happy about it, but it needs to actually happen, right? And gestures are nice, but I want to see it actually end. But the idea that people are hearing an offhand remark like that and they're no, it's over. There's just so much of that in our circles, and it's really disappointing. It's very, very disappointing, because if you do that, you're trying to just declaring yourself not to be a factor. You're kind of ignoring our own agency. What we do and the activities that we do can actually make a difference. And if we just say, "Oh, it's over, it's hopeless," it's an easy place to hide. That's an easy place to hide.
Learn cynicism. Like it's cynicism that is coming out of reality. Like it's not, look, I agree with you, so don't misunderstand me. In dealing with our political space, we hit our heads over and over again over what seems to be just nothing moves, nothing gets going. This is why this is so fascinating, because this is one of those things where U.S. policy is actually changing, and we're watching U.S. policy change almost overnight. Those people who I would probably consider myself one of, I didn't react to this video, but you know, there were other videos that I probably would react to. It's learned cynicism. It's this notion that, you know, what you think is going to happen gets shifted to the worst spectrum, because what typically happens is on the worst spectrum, especially when you're looking at what they're doing politically. Like, I'll give you an example: $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Okay, well, there's no way to put a lipstick on that pig. That sucks. They're doing that purely for tax cuts.
Yep.
Like, that's, I guess my point is, that's learned response. Like, you know that when he gets in office, that's what he's going to do. Your cynicism on it is proved correct by him getting in office and doing the very thing that you expect him to do. So when these little items and tidbits come up, the first thing is, I knew it. Meaning they were hopeful. It was something in them that they wanted, something different. But their learned response is, this is going to go tragically bad. Give me a take on that. I mean, because there's Mark would say hopium, but there's a space for hope in politics. At least I think it is. But give me your take on this.
Well, you know, I put it in the same category as the glorification of Luigi Mangione, which I wrote a whole piece about. It's the same kind of psychology, right? Did anything change as a result of Brian Thompson being shot down on the streets of New York City? Nothing changed. But somebody got hurt, right? And all the negative feelings that we all have, which are very justified about an awful healthcare system that Brian Thompson was the poster child of, where, you know, corporations make big profits from denying people care. Well, somebody got killed, and so we can feel gleeful about it. And then we can go back to our lives. And it's that kind of bitterness and that downward spiral of cynicism that is how the establishment maintains its power. It's that if we get into that mindset of nothing can ever really change, there is no real hope, but we want to see somebody get hurt. We want to know that somebody else suffered the way we're suffering. We want to, you know, let our bitterness feel validated for a minute. That is really, really a dangerous place to be. And I mean, you know, I am all about calling out the ultra rich and how they have rigged things in their favor and how they wage wars and how they're depriving us of our civil liberties and how we need a government of action to fight for working families. But if your politics and your political outlook is coming from a place of resentment, It's coming from a place of vengeance. It's never going to lead any place good, and you're going to kind of be stuck in this downward spiral. And I see that, you know, Luigi Mangione, every time he goes into court for another motion, the internet just goes wild. They're just absolutely, you know, in awe of this guy who did something that changed. I guess we don't know that he did it, and there's a lot of speculation that he may be innocent, but he allegedly did something that you know, didn't change anything. You know, that is certainly disturbing. We're seeing a potential huge change in U.S. foreign policy, moving away from World War III, and everyone's looking for a way that it doesn't count. But, you know, we're then celebrating what appears to be an act of vengeful murder that didn't change anything, and that's a moment of celebration. That's very, very disturbing. And you know, I gave this book the title on Amazon. That I had to chop The Killing of Brian Thompson out because recent tragic event or whatever. So on Amazon, it's just The Danger of American Years of Lead. On Lulu,
Yep.
it has the full title, The Killing of Brian Thompson. But you know, when I talk about the years of lead, right? That was in Italy, the way that the Italian people and their will for Italy to leave NATO was overruled. Was that in order to prevent the Italian people from getting their way, and in order to prevent a coalition government from coming into office and removing Italy from NATO, the intelligence agencies engaged in all kinds of manipulation and psyops, in which they confused people, in which there were far-right groups and far-left groups that killed each other, far-left groups killing other far-left groups, far-right groups killing other far-right groups, assassinations, bombings, etc. And it made politics so confusing. It made it just a complete clusterfuck where no one knew who anybody was or what side anybody was on, and extremist groups were very violent, that people were just kind of demoralized and became rather cynical. People left Italy in big numbers and moved to the United States or moved to other countries because Italy's politics became so unstable. And even though the majority of the Italian people wanted Italy to leave NATO, Italy stayed in NATO by default. And I think that's kind of how our elite are handling dissent in America right now. Overwhelmingly, Americans don't want the wars. They don't want their civil liberties to go away. They voted for Donald Trump on a platform that Donald Trump was going to protect their civil liberties. And Donald Trump is, to some degree or other, moving like he might move toward peace with Russia. And the FBI is being cut and broken apart. And we got Kash Patel running it. And so now the idea is to, make politics so messy and confusing, and get, all the dissidents, at each other's throats and suspicious of one another, et cetera, and create an atmosphere of cynicism so that the popular will against the establishment doesn't get enacted, and the establishment just kind of wins by default. And that is very much how they're trying to manipulate things. They don't want there to be a very clear, coherent opposition message. Instead, they want the opposition to just kind of be cynical, divided, and confused. And I fit the Luigi Mangione celebration in with that, and I think that you can put that in the same category as this kind of desperation for nothing good, for people to declare game over with U.S. foreign policy changing under Trump when things seem to be moving in a very, very good direction. But then Trump makes one comment. They're like, oh, see, nope. It's like when you're desperate to see something, you'll see it, right? If you're a hammer, the whole world will look like a nail. And, if you're expecting bad from the world, you'll get bad, right? I mean, that's kind of how these things work, right? We should be expecting the best while trying to push for it. I'm optimistic and I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing, but I'm also telling you it ain't over till it's over. It's not done yet, right? So let's wait. Let's get it signed, right? And Trump, I mean, to be fair, Trump did say he would end the war in 24 hours. It's been quite a long time, since 24 hours after he took office. So, I'm still waiting to see it, but I like what I'm seeing. Let's move ahead. But let's not declare game over either. Let's just see.
Speaking, you made a really good point about Italy and the years of lead. This just came out. I want to see if you have a take on this. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to the Romanian debacle where Colin Gogescu was effectively, the court shut down the election. He has apparently been arrested in Romania. This is the video that's popping up on Twitter just now about his arrest. Now, I don't know where these people are saying that's speaking in Romanian. This is one of the things that JD Vance highlighted during his speech, where he pointed out, dude, you are destroying elections. How is this liberal? This is not your liberal values. You're fundamentally missing the boat on this issue. And now the guy's detained. He will win if an election was held and it was an honest election. They seem to be against him winning that election because one of the things that he pointed out, no U.S. military base is going to be in Romania. No, we're not going to join this war effort, etc. Give me a take on this. It's amazing to me that Europe has devolved into this.
Sure. Well, again, it's a lot like the Ukraine narrative. We're told Ukraine was a sovereign country and that Russia is attacking a sovereign country. No, Ukraine lost its sovereignty when the USA toppled their government in 2014. And Romania is another one of these countries we're told is a sovereign country. Well, how sovereign are they if they elect somebody and the results are nullified by the forces that support NATO and the forces that are opposed to Russia and aligned with the United States? During the Cold War, during the 1980s, you had Ceausescu, who was the leader of Romania. And he was a communist leader who was kind of courted by the United States against the Soviet Union. And he got loans from American banks and such, and he pivoted in the 80s in an anti-Soviet direction. And the result was Romania getting into all kinds of debt. And in the 80s, the economy of Romania was very, very bad because American banks basically tricked Romania into pivoting away from the Soviet Union and getting into all kinds of debt. And then Romania was subjected to a color revolution in which the government was toppled, right? It was very similar to what they did all throughout Eastern Europe in 1989. And the government of Ceausescu was violently overthrown. Their leader was killed in a sham trial. I mean, it was not due process. There was, a public execution of their communist leader. And then they were subjected to decade after decade of economic shock therapy in which their economy was absolutely destroyed. Sex trafficking was a really, really big problem in Romania. Whatever you can say, I mean, of course, the socialist and communist government that existed there had a lot of problems with human rights and lack of consumer goods. And especially in the 80s, when the debt hit them, they suffered quite a bit. But, the women all had like regular jobs. They guaranteed regular jobs. They weren't being sex trafficked. And sex trafficking was huge in Romania in the 90s and the 2000s. It's still a very, very big problem, and unemployment and hunger. And they've been really struggling. In Romania, even though things were quite bad in the 80s before the fall, unlike many of the other socialist countries, they were hit pretty bad prior to it because of the debt from American banks. Polls indicate in Romania, just like all throughout Eastern Europe, life was better before the fall of the Soviet Union, before the fall of the Eastern Bloc. Poll after poll after poll shows that. And that's one thing that, in the United States, I constantly will have people condescendingly say to me, Caleb, haven't you ever talked to anyone who actually lived under communism? Well, actually, they do talk to people who lived under communism. And in the Soviet Union and former Soviet Union and Russia, Soviet nostalgia is at an all-time high. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union life was better under the Soviet Union, etc. And in every former socialist country, the Eastern Bloc, poll after poll shows people say life was better before the fall. And we're never allowed to hear that in the United States. That's just not acknowledged to be part of the discourse. We meet a guy from we meet a right-wing Ukrainian who's living in our neighborhood, and he tells us about how evil communism is, or we meet a Miami Cuban, and they tell us how evil it is, and that's supposed to be representative of the entire experience of all the people there. Well, that's not representative of all the people there and how they perceive things, right? There are different experiences. I tell people that wars tend to have two sides of them, and I mean, there's this movie that many people have seen called Gone with the Wind. It's a movie that gives the perspective of the Civil War from the side of the Confederacy. And, if you interviewed Miss Scarlett, right, I do declare them Yankees came down here and ruined everything. Oh my God, Abraham Lincoln's a tyrant. She wouldn't be lying. That would be her perspective. She saw things that way. That's one side of the story, but there's obviously another side of the story for the enslaved people, for the people living in the North, for the the working class people who were competing with slave labor and were paid very poverty wages in the South. I mean, there's other sides to the story, and that when we talk to people, from various Eastern European countries or from various communist or anti-imperialist countries, you have to remember you're hearing one side of the story that is their perspective. I remember one time, years ago, I used to sell communist newspapers on New York City subways. Me and my friend, we were going through the subways selling communist newspapers. There was a woman from Romania, and she saw us selling the communist newspaper. And I remember she said to us, I grew up in Romania. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I said, well, isn't it a lot worse now? And she paused and she said, actually, yeah, it's way worse now. But she'd never thought of that, right? And she'd come here from Romania, and all the Americans want to hear all about the horrors of communism. And no one ever validates you if you say things are worse off now. But there's no way to argue that Romania has been better off since the fall of the Soviet Union.
You were selling communist newspapers on the New York subway.
Yeah.
That is astonishing. What was the engagement with that? I'm super curious on how did they. The reason why I'm asking this is.
Well, I used to do that every day. I mean, when I first came to New York City around the time of Occupy Wall Street, I mean, I would do that to pay my bills practically. And so I would just go up and down the subways selling communist newspapers. I would stand by the subway stop in Union Square and I'd say, communist newspaper, get the latest issue. And I'd stand there. And some days after an hour, I'd walk home with 75 $1 bills in my pocket. I could just, it was, the main thing was you have a lot of traffic, a lot of people going by, and it's an oddity, right? You don't see a communist newspaper every day.
Yeah.
And then you're willing to, if people argue with you, you can give people kind of a perspective they'd never heard. It was certainly an interesting way to meet people, certainly getting out of your shell. When I was 15 years old, I was a teenager, and I went to a communist bookstore. My mom dropped me off and she said, don't leave the store. Whatever you do, don't leave the bookstore. And I remember that I listened to the speeches about the Iraq War or whatever, and then they handed me a stack of newspapers, and they're like, we're going to go out and we're going to sell the paper. And I remember I was just like, oh my goodness, you what? Like, no. You want me to, get people to, I don't know, walk up to people I don't know and ask them to pay me actual money for a newspaper about communism? You got to be kidding me. This is the most scary thing. I went out and I could barely get the words out. I could barely get the words out. And the first communist newspaper I ever sold, I was wearing my high school Letterman's jacket. I was an athlete. I played soccer, and I had a big O because I grew up in Orrville, Ohio, right? And there was a big O on my Letterman's jacket, and there was a couple, and the guy said to me, he said, well, I don't agree with you, but you're from Oberlin College, so you got a big O on there, so I'll buy your newspaper. And that was the first newspaper I ever sold, and I didn't go to Oberlin College. I just saw the O on my jacket, and he bought it. But I got to be pretty good at it. It was something I did for many years. It was just you go out to people and give them the perspective, and that was there's a whole tradition of that. I mean, nowadays people are very online, and but for a long time that was a thing that used to happen. People used to joke. You went into certain neighborhoods. There'll be communists on the street corner trying to sell you their newspaper, and that was something I did for many years. And it got me out of my shell. I learned to not be as shy. I learned to talk to people. I learned to hold my own in an argument. I learned to engage with people. It was certainly an educational thing. And it was very much an opportunity to learn from people. And, you hear all kinds of things when you're just out there talking to people, especially in New York City. We have people from all over the world. That was something I did for many years, and I gained a lot of insights from it. Yeah.
Oh, that is super fascinating. The opposition, we don't have a communist party in the U.S. anymore, unfortunately, or at the very least not a major one that was a force, let's say back during the FDR era. Yeah. And so we are stuck with the opposition of Hakeem Jeffries and his Democratic Party. Jeffries is bitching here that Democrats and lefties are bitching at him because I'm just going to play the clip and I'm going to get your take after the clip.
Well, listen, the extreme left protest me more than they protest Donald Trump. Because literally, wherever I go. So I think in part because I've declined, I've refused, I've chosen not to bend the knee to either people on the far left, and certainly not to Donald Trump.
God, he is such a weird guy. I like, and I hate saying that because I don't like to pick on physical stuff. But God, he's such a weird guy to do this job. He comes across robotic. He seems like he has like Asperger's or something like that. I don't even know what he means by the far left. What does he mean? What does the Democratic Party mean when they say the far left? I have no idea what he means by this.
I assume he's referring to Palestine protesters. I think that's what he's referring to. More recently,
And he defines the far left as being pro or being against genocide. It has to be a different standard. Like, that can't be the only standard that he's using. Make his argument about the far left.
Yeah, but that's probably, I would assume that's what he's referring to. I will say that Hakeem Jeffries, I find him to be despicable, because when he was first, running for the U.S. House of Representatives, he was running against Charles Barron. And I don't know if you know Charles Barron. He was a member of the New York City Council. He's been a member of the New York State General Assembly. And I actually just got to hang out with Charles Barron in Florida at the Uhuru trial. He called himself an elected revolutionary, is what he called himself. He's a black nationalist and a socialist. And he was in the New York City Council for many years, representing East New York. And he ended up getting the endorsement of a number of key figures, and he ran against Hakeem Jeffries in the Democratic primary, for the House of Representatives. And I was out on the street campaigning for Charles Barron. And the whole political establishment came together and said, we just can't let Charles Barron win. And Hakeem Jeffries was basically handed the seat, because I believe there was a robocall from Barack Obama telling people they had to vote for Hakeem Jeffries. And there was, they went crazy. There were signs, that were in the subways, and I had a picture of like Stalin, Mao, Gaddafi, and Mugabe, and it said all people who Charles Barron supports. And they went over the top against Charles Barron, and Hakeem Jeffries ended up winning the seat. And I was out there campaigning, and Charles Barron has a base of support in East New York, but the entire Democratic Party machine came together. And then the icing on the cake was, I don't know how they swung this, but it had to have been arranged. A couple days before the election, David Duke, the white supremacist, endorsed Charles Barron. And
Are you serious?
Yeah, because he's anti-Israel, right? Because and the New York Post put that on the front page. David Duke endorses black candidate Charles Barron. And that was it was like I had never seen like a full, it was like they were determined to keep Charles Barron out of office. And it was like the establishment was just adamant that Charles Barron could not be a member of the U.S. Congress. And so Hakeem Jeffries was just the other guy, right? That this revolutionary, this anti-imperialist, this guy who went to Gaza to stand with the Palestinians, this friend of Hugo Chavez, he was going to win. And so that couldn't be allowed to happen. So Hakeem Jeffries was just the establishment guy who ended up getting it. And that's all he's really ever been. I just see him as a walking incarnation of the political establishment in New York City. That's all he's ever been. And so I look up to Charles Barron. So whenever I hear Hakeem Jeffries talking, it's just like, yeah, whatever, whatever he needs to say, whatever the establishment line is. And he's very, very pro-Israel. If I'm not mistaken, I believe at one rally he got up and said, Israel today, Israel tomorrow, Israel forever, which was almost a reference. I mean, it was like an odd, dog whistle of segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Right. And many people noticed that, and they said that was a very odd thing for him to say. But yeah, when he talks about the far left protesting him, I'm sure it's Palestine, because there is a very big Palestine movement in New York City where he's representing, and there's many people in New York City that are like, maybe we shouldn't give Israel a free pass to commit genocide against the Palestinians. And I'm sure he doesn't appreciate those protests against him. So he feels like he's a victim somehow of people getting up and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't bomb and kill the Palestinians. So there you go. And in New York City in particular, the pro-Israel folks have a lot of power, and there's a lot of, if you oppose Israel, there's a lot of people that are lined up against you. He's lined up with those folks, with the pro-Israel lobby in New York City, but there's a lot of people among the rank and file who don't agree with them. I remember you know, I was arrested at an Occupy Wall Street demonstration. And I was in the jail cell, you know, in the holding cell with other people. And we were talking about politics. And somebody asked me, they said, "Do you hate the Israelis?" And I said, "Well, I support the Palestinians or whatever. I don't hate the Israelis or whatever."
Yeah.
But then I found out they weren't talking about the Israelis in Israel. They were talking about Israeli landlords in Brooklyn, and apparently a load of the landlords are not Jews, but literally Israelis. Israeli companies control Brooklyn, right? And that they have property in the West Bank, and they've got property in Israel, and they are gentrifying Crown Heights, you know, and that Israeli corporations are something that many working class people in New York City feel has a lot of power and is pushing them out of their neighborhoods, et cetera. So it was quite a quite interesting conversation. But you know, when you talk about gentrification in New York City, you're not just, you know, fighting against big corporations. You're literally fighting against Israel, because a lot of the corporations that are doing the gentrification and driving up the rents are literally based in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. I mean, it's pretty wild to see how all these things are connected.
Just wow. I want to add to that from that Hakeem Jeffries clip. This from James Carville. James Carville, it's time for a daring political maneuver. Democrats, there's nothing Democrats can legitimately do to stop Trump, so we need a tactical pause in our fight to plan for the future. Again, I don't like, I think what people want is them to represent something and to be something. Like, meaning they want something with a value set, with a core. They want to be able to say, okay, what does the Democratic Party stand for, and being able to explain what that means and the actions that come out of whatever that context is, as opposed to we're just completely reflexive against whatever Donald Trump does. And because Donald Trump seems popular right now, and he is the political gravity, we can't really do anything about that. And because we can't do anything about that, we need to pause and we need to think about the future. That is so frustrating for me to hear. Like, that is super frustrating. Why do you think they're missing the boat? Like, why do you, like, what I articulate is, you know, a project 2025 from the left. Why don't they hit that? Why can't they see that? Like, why are they in their bubble in this way? And I say liberals are in a bubble, either in Europe and the United States. They're in a bubble. Why do you think they're missing the boat?
Well, I think, if anything, this is kind of the brilliance of Donald Trump. He's got the Democratic Party in the ideal weak position to be, whatever he does, they complain about it. And that's all that they are, right? And if he can keep them in this spot, he is just going to walk right all over them, right? And he's got this thing where he says something. Again, he doesn't do something. He says something, and they react to it. Oh, you know, how many times does this happen that he says something, and then CNN and all of them go into overdrive about it, he said something. And if they stay in this space, Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to roll right over them, and he's going to get everything he wants. And I think that James Carville and a lot of Democrats realize that if they remain in that spot that Donald Trump has, that little corner Donald Trump has painted them into, they're just going to keep losing. However, the problem for the Democrats is that if they are actually going to, gain any momentum, they're going to have to actually stand for something. And they made a decision as a party that, the Bernie Sanders agenda, actually fighting for healthcare for all, Medicare for all, actually fighting for, college for all, those things. No, we're just not going to do that. We will not do that. And they might make some noise come election season, but they're not going to do that. And they will actively fight against any faction in their party that actually wants to, raise those proposals in a serious way. The Democrats have kind of painted themselves into a corner, and this is what they're stuck being. And Donald Trump is just going to keep winning as long as they're in that corner. But leaving that corner would require an element of political bravery that I don't see anyone within that establishment having. Bill Clinton, he led something called the Democrat Leadership Council in the 1980s that pushed out anything that was left of the Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party. And since then, I mean, there's really nobody left in the Democratic Party that has charisma, that has strength, that has kind of a willingness to push back against popular forces. The fact that they nominated Kamala Harris, who was less popular than Biden is. They nominated her last time, even though throughout the party, everybody knew she's just wildly unlikable. I mean, here we are. And that was the argument. Talk about weird. I mean, that was her argument, right, against Donald Trump. He's weird. He's weird. JD Vance is weird, right?
It's
Normal people
so strange.
just go along and believe everything the establishment says, but Trump and Vance are weird. I mean, it's like, what are we in first grade? I mean, this is, but this is where we're at. And
Campaign
that's
about
really
joy.
Democrats had. Vote for us because we're normal. We're the de facto what you're supposed to believe. Well, look outside and look at the Francis Scott Key Bridge falling down, and look at the conditions in the country, and the opioid epidemic, and the next generation stuck in a lifetime of low wage, short term service sector jobs. Yeah, the status quo isn't going to cut it. So somebody who's got something new and someone who's at least speaking against that status quo is probably going to win. And in most people's minds, calling someone weird is not an argument at all, right? If anything, it makes it okay. You got something new and different. You're gonna get us out of this mess. Let's hear it. Now, again, I worry about the fallout. Now, I'm hearing the idea we might get a stimulus check from the Doge money. Have you heard this? Right, that they might give us instead of just saving the money, they might send us a stimulus check with the money.
I believe it when I see it.
Yeah, well, that would be nice, right? Send Americans a check. But honestly,
and by the way, it would be powerful. It was one of the things that people remember about Trump is the stimulus check. That's one of the, when you talk to people, it comes up in conversation. I just don't believe it. Yeah, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, so that would be nice. But honestly, if you just take all these good-paying government jobs out of the economy and you replace them, and the jobs that do exist are the low-wage jobs that our economy is turning out right now, where you can't make enough to rent an apartment or get a mortgage on a house, or Americans are just not making enough. And if you get rid of all the good-paying government jobs and you replace them with private sector jobs that are paying so little, I don't see that being good for the economy in the long term. I just don't see. There's going to be problems ahead, no doubt, right? And that I understand that Elon Musk is trying to break apart the state, which he sees the state as holding back the interests of business owners, et cetera. But the state has a lot to do with stimulating the economy. Look, the capitalist system has a built-in problem of glut. Where, the reason we have food stamps, it's not just because people feel bad for low-income families and want them to have food. It's because big agribusiness needs to sell products. And, in the 90s, there was talk of cutting food stamps, and there were big protests against it, sponsored by Kraft. They were sponsoring it because if you cut food stamps, they're going to lose money. And that the U.S. government does a huge amount to stimulate the economy because of the built-in, irrationality of the capitalist economic system. When people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there's too much food, where you have this problem of glut, where, the U.S. government buys billions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, to keep the agribusiness from collapsing, to keep the price of dairy high enough that the farm sector keeps going. And that if you just get the government out, the result is going to be you're going to have more instability on the market. And so, I worry about the long-term effects. I'm excited about the foreign policy moves. And I can't say I'm not happy to some degree or other to see the FBI and CIA and other institutions, USAID, broken up. But at the same time, there's going to be a big hole in our economy that needs to be fixed. And, I liked what Donald Trump said. When he was out of office, he gave a speech about the quantum leap. And he wants to build new cities, and all of that. And I hope that he means some of that. And that would be great to see him investing in communities. Ultimately, we need a national bank to inject credit into American communities, et cetera. I don't see any of that on the agenda. I see kind of a libertarian agenda, and libertarian economics, whether you call it Austrian school, Chicago school, Montpellier society, whatever you want to call it. It's premised on the notion that you can cut your way into economic growth. You cannot cut your way into growth. You just can't do it. Economic growth does not come from having less, right? If you cut the wages of government employees, if you cut government spending, if you cut the funding for infrastructure, the result is you have less. And that, rich people, the ultra rich, they reinvest their money to make more money.
Right.
You and I, we spend money when we have it. But the richest of the rich, if they have more money and they don't have to pay taxes on it, it sits in their bank account until the economy gets moving again and they can make more money by reinvesting it. And if they can't make more money on it, it sits in their bank account and it gradually depreciates over time because of inflation. Yeah, I mean, you cannot cut your way into economic growth. Austerity economics doesn't work. It is austerity economics, Ludwig von Mises and all of that stuff, Milton Friedman, Friedrich von Hayek, Alan Greenspan, all of that. This is wizardry. This is flim flam. And basically what it is it's a mechanism for trying to convince people that it is in society's interest for we, the working people, to carry the burden of the irrational capitalist economy. This economy based on speculation and derivative ripoff schemes and the profits of the rich. This economy is very unstable, and it's about making us pay for the irrationality of the economy by taking cuts on our services, and it doesn't improve the economy. And in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they tried to implement this, and it was an economic disaster in Eastern Europe. They tried it in South and Central America, and everywhere they tried to implement austerity economics, they implemented it, and it was a disaster. And here in the United States, we've been doing this for years. School choice, prisons for profit, you name it. We are the most free market oriented society of any Western country. And the result is we don't have a higher life expectancy. We don't have better living conditions. No, austerity economics is flim flam. It doesn't work. You cannot cut your way into economic growth. And we're going to learn that the hard way. What we need is a government that punches up and will break the power of the big monopolies and stand up for working families. We have a government that punches down right now, a government that restricts economic growth, a government that holds back innovation and creativity. So a lot of people want to break that government up. But they're going to learn that we don't just need to break up the austerity government and the degrowth Malthusian government. We need a government that punches up, a government that fights for working families. We need a national bank to inject credit into communities. We need to take our natural resources under public ownership. We need schools, healthcare, and education as a way to invest in our population, because it is human labor power and human creativity and human beings that are the source of real wealth, physical economy. It comes from human beings. It doesn't come from Wall Street speculation and ripoffs. And we ultimately need to invest in our population. We need to build infrastructure, new highways, new bridges, new universities, new hospitals, new power plants, right? Physical economy. We need a government of action to fight for working families.
Caleb Maupin, I agree with everything that just came out of your mouth. Caleb Maupin, he is speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and he is Caleb, are you the leader of the Center for Political Innovation?
Well, Peter Coffin and myself are the co-directors.
Co-directors.
So we share that role, and we lead the organization, the Center for Political Innovation. We're doing great stuff. We're headed towards Chicago in July. We're going to have a big convention in Chicago, July 12th. That's going to be the event of the summer. There'll be 400 people packed into that auditorium. We're very excited for it. So, keep that
badass, man.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Caleb Maupin, man, thank you for this. Always appreciate talking to you, Caleb. Always learn something from these conversations. Be safe.
Right.
All right. I want to bring in my next guest. We are joined with Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof, he is former senior policy analyst for the Office of Secretary of Defense, author, regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of foreign policy, or let's say experience, in the Department of Defense. Welcome to the show, my man. How you doing this morning, Michael? You doing all right?
I'm great, Jamal. Thank you very much for having me. I was listening to Caleb. I knew Caleb when he was on RT.
Did you? Well, yeah, that's right. You would have met him on RT. Yeah, the man is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Everything comes out of his mouth.
Very good. He's very good.
I want to get to the mineral deal. So apparently Donald Trump has mobbed his way into a mineral deal with Ukraine. This is mind-blowing to me, as I was telling my audience. If you are a rando person in Ukraine, just random person, you vote for Zelensky because you want the war to stop. Zelensky gets in after the 2014 coup when they overthrew the Yanukovych government. So the idea that this was a democracy is nonsense. It was off the table from the moment of the coup. You get assurances from Washington, from Europe, that you don't have to live up to the Minsk agreements, which were set in order to stop a larger war. So you blow it off. They dump all of this military, they do all of the spending into your country that is effectively on the border of Russia. And in doing so, you go on a killing spree with ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the east. Russia gets involved. Istanbul agreements comes to fruition. Boris Johnson comes in and tells them, hey, you don't have to live up to these agreements either. In fact, we'll give you all of the money in the world, and you can beat them on the ground, and our economic sanctions will be crushing. So just keep fighting. The war will be great. Zelensky pulls out of that agreement, of the Istanbul agreements, and continues to fight. 3 years later, with 600 dead Ukrainians, somebody has to ask, what was this for? And then on top of that, you're now put in this position of, hey, I understand that you've lost 20% of your territory, but you also now need to give us 50% of your mineral wealth for the foreseeable future. That is astonishing. And for all of these people, like, we're with Ukraine, we're backing Ukraine. This doesn't look like backing Ukraine. This looks like a country that has been carved up, to put it mildly. Give me your take on this mineral deal. Zelensky is apparently supposed to be coming here on Friday in order to sign the agreement.
Well, the Zelensky was voted in originally on the premise that he promised that he was going to establish peace with Russia. Just the opposite has happened, and we see Ukraine today as just a shadow of what it used to be, and it's probably going to be, as you say, carved up even more.
Yeah.
In terms of this minerals agreement, there's no security guarantee in it.
Nope.
It's only economic.
Just be clear: no NATO, no security agreements, no troops on the ground, no agreements at all. Really, all of that stuff is supposed to be worked out after the fact. It's just wild.
Well, and the notion of putting Eastern or European troops in as peacekeepers, I think, is a non-starter, which is one of the proposals on the security side of it. On the economic side, just before we leave that, it's meant to be a payback for all that what Trump sees as all the wealth and treasure that the United States has poured in, but got nothing in return. Whereas the Europeans had established loans, which I must say will probably never be paid back anyway. But now we have something tangible if you can extract. But most of the rare earths, as opposed to the minerals, are in the eastern part, which is occupied by the Russians. Putin, in very recent days, has said, "Hey, we're happy to do a deal with the United States." Now, that's probably created a little consternation internally, but I think it reaps profits for Russia as well as the United States. Now, this agreement is meant to be with Ukraine is meant to create a fund for reconstruction, because the United States has whittled it down to and Ukraine has whittled it down to that it'll be a 50-50 proposition. So whatever Ukraine makes out of it, they can apply that to reconstruction, and the United States would get 50% toward repayment, and up to, was it 300 billion, something of that sort. It used to be 500 billion. I think it's come down. So I think in one sense that is sort of a backdoor approach toward security in one respect, and that the United States will be wedded to the country to protect its investments. On the other hand, if the Europeans, and they were talking about this just day before yesterday, of passing $200 billion worth of the profits from the interest rather from the Russian frozen assets to continue the war. Well, that's going to be a non-starter. I think what Trump is negotiating, frankly, without saying so, is the U.S. role in the Ukraine crisis. We're out of it except for the economic interest. And if the Europeans want to go at it, Article 5 will not apply. There will be no agreement for NATO. And frankly, the Europeans, and I think they admit, they cannot do it on their own. So this thing may just through attrition come to a slow halt over time. But what will prevail will be the terms that the United States and Russia work out. And those
Yeah.
terms seem to be emerging rather clearly. No giving up of territories by the Russians, no NATO. And I think what's left, and even Putin has said, he will, he's not for the disintegration of the Ukrainian state as such. But given that they have a destructive tendency anyway, and the fact that you have other countries that on the in Eastern Europe, which happen to be NATO countries that are biting at the bit to take back portions of West Ukraine because of their ethnic populations. I think you're just going to see a shell of what used to be Ukraine.
Wow. What do you
That's
think
my
they're
projection. I could be wrong, but I also believe that what is being worked out between.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What's being negotiated? Because, like you said, it can't just be Ukraine. It has to be more.
What's being worked out between Trump and Putin is something which is more geopolitically and geostrategically minded in terms of two strategic partners of equal standing working with one another, whereas in which Ukraine is just a little cog, and Europe can either go along with it or not. The chances are they're not going to be able to do anything self-sustaining if they want to create. And I think it's also the beginning of the end of NATO as we know it today. And I think we're going to be seeing withdrawals from Germany, particularly with this rather hostile government that exists in Germany that's coming in right now. And I think that most of us don't care. And you know,
now what Germany thinks, no, not in the least.
No, we don't care. And you know, that's why you also see Trump focusing more in the Western hemispheric area in terms of trying to reestablish, without saying so, the whole notion of spheres of influence, and actually work out strategic relationships with Russia, in which they go into joint ventures, which will be economic primarily, maybe even joint ventures into the Arctic. The notion, I think, on the part of the United States is to try to wean Russia from China.
Right.
But I don't see that happening. No, this is not the Cold War period like it used to be. They used to be our policy at one time. We used to do things with China during the Cold War against then Soviet Union, which in some cases were quite successful. But in reality, it's changed. And I also think, without Trump admitting to it, he's admitting that we indeed are in a multipolar, not a unipolar world today.
Where does Europe fit into this? They're complaining.
Where does Europe?
Yeah, where does Europe fit into this? Like Keith Kellogg has been said initially, in the beginning, Donald Trump's people were making comments, and people like me were like, "Whoa, these comments are not conducive to creating an environment for peace." Then we find out that Keith Kellogg's job was effectively to babysit Europe, which is just utterly hilarious, right? In babysitting Europe, to effectively listen to their bitching, listen to their griping, but to not really do anything because he's not in part of the negotiations. He's just there to babysit. Macron comes to the US, tries to get Donald Trump's ear, lies about the start of the war, effectively saying Russia blew off the agreement. It was Europe that blew off the agreement. Trump listens to him, flim-flams him, and goes about his business, with the policy being what the policy is. Indicative or indicated by the UN vote, the UN Security Council resolution vote, that took a very neutral tone towards the war. Keir Starmer is apparently supposed to be also coming to have this kind of conversation with Trump. All of them are trying to convince Trump with all of these fanciful ideas of, hey, we just need American backing. We can put in European troops. Trump misspoke about Russia being okay with U.S. peacekeepers or peacekeepers from various nations. Regardless of the flag, Russia's pointed out this is a non-starter. Those people are nose under the camel's tent and would be attacked immediately. Does Europe have the capability of being a fly in the ointment? Like, meaning, even if Trump wanted to stop it, does Europe have any capability at all of doing so other than just complaining?
That's all they have. They have
Yeah.
offered no alternatives. And as Trump pointed out, they all had 3 years to try to work something out. And you can't continue doing the same thing that doesn't work and hope for a different outcome. That, as they say, is the definition of insanity or idiocy, or both. And that's what we're seeing today. And the Europeans have nothing else. Look, UK just thinks the UK and all of NATO cannot do anything on a consistent, massive scale without the United States. All of their forces combined do not equal to what the United States can project. But yet they act like they're still imperial, and frankly, the UK has got to finally come to grips with reality that it's got internal issues, that higher inflation, and the people are disgruntled with Starmer. They want him out. And besides that, the UK itself is no bigger than the state of Indiana. They just need to give up their notions of empire. Look, the history of UK and I may have mentioned this to you in the past, but the history of UK and Russia, the animosity between the two go back centuries, centuries, and yet they want to continue. And the United States does not want to continue to get involved in their ancient historical disputes. I mean, that's what it boils down to. We've moved on, and we have other strategic interests in mind rather than just Europe. And given the way way things move today through communication and weapons programs and systems, it's made this a much smaller world. So and because it's much smaller, and we got major strategic partners in Russia and China, all with nuclear weapons, it's better to work and compete economically, but to work together on programs rather than to become hostile and adversarial toward each other. And I think that's going to be the reality. In time, I think Russia and the United States can resurrect some agreements, particularly on the numbers of nuclear weapons. Maybe there's even talk now by Trump of cutting military expenditure in half by everybody, including China. And Russia has stated that China appears to be interested in doing the same thing. Look, the Chinese budget is half of the United States military budget, and Russia's is half of that of China's.
Yeah, it's like $80 billion. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's we're trillion.
Yeah.
Give or take a few million.
I am curious from your take on this. Like, with this kind of geopolitical shift on the world stage, and with all of these countries effectively trying to figure out, okay, where do we fit into this? China, Russia, India, the BRICS countries, the global South, Europe in its own kind of isolation bubble. How can I ask this question? It seems that Donald Trump is serious about moving forward with this, regardless of what Europe does, regardless of what Ukraine wants. And is trying to come to some kind of terms of a deal, whatever that deal is. He seems he's going to let his people do it. He's going to have this big ceremony, either in Moscow or DC or wherever, when he shakes Putin's hand and says, okay, the world is at a new norm. Do you think we can maintain that new norm, though? Trump is going to be 80 years old. He's going to die at some point. Somebody else is going to be leading this country, be it Democrat or Republican. Is it possible to maintain that deal? Like, I guess what I'm asking is this a fickle mistress? Is this one of those things that, yeah, Trump is putting into play, but anybody can undo it with the same speed at which Trump put it into play? Or am I getting this wrong?
No, I think that after Trump's first term, you saw what happened afterwards under the Biden administration.
Right.
The world came apart, and all of the partnerships and balances, strategic balances in the world fell apart. And Trump is now trying to reconstruct that. After his term, unless a Republican is and with the same creativity and commitment to what's being formed now is elected following him, I think we could be right back to where we started, because the Democrats have clearly shown they have no alternative approach except to complain about what Trump is doing, and secondly, to create adversarial roles for Russia and China. And in this world today, you cannot do that because of how sensitive and things are. And I see Taiwan potentially coming to a head before Trump's term is up.
Really?
In 28. Yeah.
Now, why do you think that's coming to a head?
By what Trump has been doing and saying in recent days on Taiwan, working with them, and it's almost, from the Chinese perspective, it's almost
Like Ukraine?
What do you call it? A
Ukraine.
revocation of the one China policy.
Right. I consider it like Ukraine. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
please.
and I think that I think Russia and Xi Jinping are going to have to come to an understanding to avoid that problem. But Xi Jinping has made it very clear that inevitably Taiwan will come under China auspices altogether. So we'll see what happens. But we're heading for a confrontation there, and you see, and if you listen to the interview that Rubio, the Secretary of State, the new Secretary of State, just gave on Fox, he's basically saying that's where our shift is going to be, and that the United States is a Pacific power. So that does put us in direct confrontation with the Chinese from a military standpoint, but we can also convert that to economic competition if we so choose. But when the politics with Taiwan come into play, we've got to, then that's when things get really muddy. And the Chinese really have an advantage when it comes to Taiwan in some respects, because everything we do in the Pacific up against the Far East, it has to be imported. From aircraft carriers to setting up alliances and with Japan, South Korea, and I don't see those countries going up against China. They're not going to battle against it. We might use them as bases, but in the Eastern mindset, that might look like a potential for war and confrontation. And we've seen that with Kim Jong-un. Now he's been quiet, but now he's beginning to rustle feathers once again because he's not getting attention. And I see that problem emerging here by spring. So he's being neglected.
That's what I'm laughing at. He's not getting attention. Nobody's talking about him in this moment. He feels
he feels left out.
Yeah. God, man, that's so wild. But Trump was willing to go and have that meeting with Kim Jong-un. And honestly, look, I despise Trump. Despise him. When he did that, I said, that's my president. Because that's what I want. It's a rational foreign policy. Like the notion that this guy has nukes. This guy's threatening to nuke America. And our response is, well, we don't talk to dictators. Okay, that's nonsense. We talk to people in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We talk to all of these people. Don't give me this nonsense that we don't talk to dictators. It's nonsense. When Trump said, yes, I'm going to go. I'm going to shake his hand. I'm going to come to a deal. And it worked. Like, how can I say this? I don't feel a bit over the top over this, but it matters. Like this idea, it's a proof of concept. All the time, you're effectively told peace doesn't work. You got to be strong. Got to have a $1 trillion military. You got to be threatening. Otherwise, nobody takes you seriously. Donald Trump goes over there, shakes the man's hand, and they stop firing missiles into the Sea of Japan. And I said, oh my God, peace works. Meaning I can make agreements with people. These are rational actors. And I can make agreements with them, whether I like them or not, whether I like their country or not. The fact that he did it was a big deal to me, especially in the foreign policy sense. Do you get the sense that this is something that he's also going to do this time around? Do you get the sense that his job is, I believe I'm going to bring peace, not war. And if I need to talk to Kim Jong-un, if I need to talk to Xi Jinping, if I need to talk to Vladimir Putin, if I need whoever, I will have that conversation in order to do that. Do you get a sense that's where he is?
I do, and I think that's only because what has happened in the past hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. Try something else. Now, you may not like Trump's personality. It's that New York bombastic nonsense, and overlording of everybody. But but he's effective in terms of policy formulation and its implementation.
Yeah.
And so far, what he's doing is working. He is coming to a resolution in 3 weeks, 4 weeks now, on Ukraine that we haven't been able to do in the last 4 years under Biden.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
that
that's the point.
says something. And now they're talking potential for a ceasefire and working out deals. But when you have an economic stake in something, you're going to be less inclined to want to blow it up. And I think that's what.
So you think
is
that's the
doing.
point of the mineral deal? That
Yeah.
because Steve Bannon had a conversation about this. I think I have the clip somewhere, but Steve Bannon was like, "This is a horrible plan. This sucks. We need to get out of Ukraine fully. We shouldn't have anything to do with it. We should have no economic ties. We need to get out of it, full stop. If we are in it, then we're in it." Basically, that this is the mineral deal is kind of a play in order to keep the United States invested in the country in a way where, well, of course, we want to maintain our security. We want to be able to get the minerals. In order to get the minerals, we need Ukraine to be secure. If Ukraine is secure, then Zelensky gets what he ultimately wants in regards to the U.S. entanglement in Ukraine. That's the way Bannon is looking at it. Give me a take on that point of view.
Well, I think that if you're going to be investing, at least the other side is working with you, namely Putin, working in a cooperative way on mineral extraction, then you have established a relative peace. But nothing is ever absolute in this game, and that's why I think Trump is basically saying the U.S. Role in conducting the war is over, and if the Europeans want to go at it, they're on their own, and then Russia can do whatever it wants, and because Trump looks at everything in terms of contributions and donations and how much you put into something, particularly now he wants 5% NATO if they're going to be protected, but they can't even do 3%. Then it's clear that for him that makes it easy in terms of the decision making process, it seems. And that's how he gauges it, and that's why he sees a more lucrative opportunity by working with Putin and by extracting the minerals out of Ukraine in order to get something back for the U.S. investment of well, actually it's up to about $300 billion. So we would be breaking even financially if we can extract it all.
I'm going to play the clip just because I want to do Bannon fair, and see if you changes this. I kind of agree with him. I mean, I get your point that if Russia is involved in this, then all parties are equally represented.
Yeah.
So I do get it.
Saying that in exchange for your agreement to this partnership, U.S. aid will continue. Donald Trump himself said it's kind of haphazardly, but he did say aid could continue under this framework. It seems like this is a further entanglement of the U.S. in Ukraine, and who's going to extract the rare minerals? Much of them are under Russian occupation.
My advice is walk the fuck away. I want to walk away so hard. I'm even prepared to say, okay, maybe we don't even investigate, which I think we have to, but we have to walk away. I don't want their minerals. Okay, there's enough minerals in the rest of the world.
What's the reasoning behind this proposal now? Like, why?
I think President Trump looks at Iraq and looks at other places in Afghanistan, and I think as a deal guy is sitting there going, look, remember in Iraq and Afghanistan,
they didn't take the oil.
The net present already didn't take the minerals in Afghanistan. The net present value of our expedition was $9 trillion. Think of what this country would be like that if in the last 20 years we spent $9 trillion in rebuilding America, the factories would have. What would Detroit be like? What would St. Louis be like?
Michael, Steve Bannon is fascinating to me. As a lefty, I listen to that and think to myself, yeah, he's right. What would $10 trillion have done to America if we invested that money as opposed to going blowing stuff up?
I've been saying that for years with respect to Iraq.
Yeah.
And where we, when you combine the amounts of Iraq and Afghanistan, the amount of treasure we poured in there and the lives that were lost, it amounts to more than $9 trillion, and which could have been applied to our domestic posture. But that wasn't the thinking of the neocons. I think Bannon is about half right. I think that's why you don't see him as an advisor to
Right. Right.
Because
it's like half of what he
he's
says.
not on board with the Trump approach. Trump wants to get something back for the investment the United States put into it. At least it shows, and it also allows us to integrate ourselves with the outside world and not appear to be isolationists, but we're doing it more on an economic basis than a military basis. And
Then why do you think? I'm sorry to interrupt. Why do you think Boris Johnson came out and agreed with the deal then? Like, if Bannon is saying, okay, this is a horrible idea, we should not be entangling ourselves like this. And then Boris Johnson, who is a complete advocate for the war, even to this day, is like, hey, this is a great idea. Initially,
I think he saw the handwriting on the wall.
Oh, you think that's what it is? He's just been bent to form. It's not.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know he was full board to encourage Zelensky to go full speed ahead and arm, and then we'll back you up. That was then. This is now. This is the new reality, and he obviously is trying to ingratiate himself with Trump. And I hope that Trump is wise to him and does. I would imagine they look upon themselves as good buddies and all that stuff. But the reality is that he got us more into this conflict. He actually advised against Ukraine signing Minsk II. And if Minsk II was signed, we wouldn't be having this trouble today.
Yeah. Michael, man, I always appreciate these conversations with you. I really do. Michael Maloof is a senior policy analyst in the Office of Secretary of Defense. He's a regular contributing analyst on RT and other media outlets. He has nearly 30 years of experience in the Department of Defense. Michael, my man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
You have a good one. Oh, that is fascinating. Look, the reason why I asked that question is you get somebody like Boris Johnson, who is a full-throated advocate of the war, who wanted it to continue, who is the guy who parachuted in. He didn't use a parachute, we just used it being hyperbolic, in order to tell Zelensky, keep going. You will not get security guarantees from us. You will keep fighting. We will help you economically. We will help you militarily. We will do all that stuff, but you are going to keep fighting. Zelensky agrees. Okay, fair enough. It is weird to me that he comes out after saying, okay, this is extortion that Donald Trump is doing, to being somewhat of an advocate for the deal. And if you listen to Bannon, Bannon's point is, I don't want to be entangled in Ukraine at all. I want to be out. Even if it's out and not have an investigation, I want to be out. We have wasted trillions on these foreign policy wars. We need to stop. That point is correct. Like I said, Bannon is a weird case for me because he always gets his moniker as being a white nationalist. When he was running with Trump, he was the populist aspect of Trump in an economic sense. Now, if Trump gets elected under Bannon, working with Bannon, do they invest that money into America? That's the rub. We're talking about the Republican Party, no less. They tend to cut stuff and give themselves and their donors tax cuts. That money doesn't necessarily come back to the American public. As a lefty, any lefty would agree with that. We spent $10 trillion. What could we have done to America with $10 trillion? What do our subways look like? Do we have high-speed rail? What do our airplanes? Are they falling out of the sky? What can you do with that money? It's that part. And so when you're looking at Ukraine, you're thinking we spent $350 billion in this. What could we have done with the money? It's that. Now, I agree with Bannon on this, but the catch is always, what do you do with the money? What do you do with the money? It's that part. It sounds like Bannon's thing is, I don't want to be entangled in Ukraine. And for Boris Johnson, it could be, I don't want to break ties with Trump. But it also could be, if America is entangled in Ukraine with resource wealth, maybe that is a kind of security guarantee because America is want to protect its investment, meaning that it's an entanglement issue that Johnson may be agreeing with, or for that matter, that, what's his name? It's fascinating. God, the politics of this is fascinating because all of these countries are maneuvering to try to, let's say, maintain what they consider to be their best interests. You're included. It's fascinating. But let me go to my guests. I am joined the man of this next 30 minutes, KJ No. He is a fantastic friend of the show. He's a journalist, political analyst, writer, teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He was contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon, and is now available at iacenter.org. KJ, my man, how you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Oh man, it's good to see you too. I want to start on a cancer drug that I noticed. I noticed this, I think it was a few weeks ago, but it has finally bubbled up into U.S. media. And they point out that the cancer drug has a better outcome than the main drug for the U.S. supply. CNN runs the story. They run the story. And then they immediately put a knife in the medication and bringing up doubts about the medication because, of course, it's Chinese. I want to get your take on this. I'm going to play a small bit of this.
Will Ripley is out front. Chinese scientists celebrating a breakthrough, one that may have just outperformed a top U.S. cancer drug. Akeso, barely known a year ago, is now shaking up the biotech world. Their new cancer drug, ivonescimab, their first to get major international attention, going head-to-head with Keytruda, one of Merck's biggest sellers, more than $130 billion so far. Clinical trials in China show it kept lung tumors from growing for nearly twice as long, sending the stock of Akeso's U.S. partner soaring. Some call it a game changer, just like Chinese startup DeepSeek shook up AI. China's innovation push goes beyond biotech.
Now, this is where it turns. And I don't need to play the part where it turns. I'm just going to point out it turns and they start questioning whether or not China is being on the level with this, questioning the efficacy of the medication, questioning whether the results are correct. They trash it for the next 2 minutes, for the next 2 minutes and 20 seconds. What is going on with this? Because this is being heralded as a game changer for cancer treatment. And they're comparing it in many respects, even in the article, they compared it to the AI that came out of China that blew away, or at the very least, just dramatically shook up the market in regards to AI. What is going on with this cancer drug?
Yeah, it's one of many drugs that China is testing and putting out to market that are really kind of revolutionizing the medical field and treatment of many, many chronic diseases. The Chinese are doing extraordinary work in medical research. And as you point out, it's like DeepSeek. Just as DeepSeek is shifting the landscape of AI, there are multiple Chinese biotech companies and medical firms that are shifting the landscape of treatment. And they're doing this inside a system where they believe that everybody has the right to affordable treatment. So if these things come onto market, certainly in China, there will be a tiny fraction of the cost of what it costs in the United States for drugs that are, in this particular situation, less effective. This drug gives a person, it doubles your lifespan from what the comparable US, I think Merck medication is. And so, I mean, these are, we're on the cusp of a revolution in terms of medical treatment of some really, really serious diseases. But the CNN piece is a hit piece on China and on Chinese medicines and on Chinese biotech. Question is, why are they doing this? And the answer is obvious, because they want to protect the entrenched interests of US biotech companies. And, there have been multiple articles in the US news which says, well, China is curing cancer, but, at what cost? They're curing cancer too fast. Or, said that healing people is not a sustainable strategy, right? The whole notion that you might have a medical system that actually helps people get better rather than uses their sickness as a way to gouge excessive profits is so completely and diametrically opposed to the US system that they can do nothing but attack the Chinese biotech researchers that are making these tremendous steps that are really, a gift for humanity. They want to attack that, just as they're attacking DeepSeek.
And by the way, just to be clear, the American public agrees with you entirely. Evidence of that is Luigi Maggioni, the one that murdered the healthcare CEO in New York. Well, at the very least, they think he did. There's stuff going on with the trial right now. He is a rock star. And it is very bizarre to see somebody being a rock star for murder, which gets across the level of ire, the hatred towards a system that they feel like they're stuck with, like with these insurance companies and everything else that is effectively profiting off of their illness. That and the applause that effectively ends up going to him is mind-blowing. But he gets across.
But note, Jamal, people are very, very restricted in what they can say about Luigi Mangione. I mean, he's essentially being censored from social media, and people who have posted or, lauded his work, in some cases, they have been prosecuted. And so once again, we have to understand that despite public sentiment being what it is, the repressive forces are coming down hard because they want to make sure the system continues as is. There is no alternative. That's the message they want to send to people. And they certainly do not want an alternative coming out of the global south, like from China.
It is fascinating. I agree with you. Something else that piqued my interest. There are articles, screaming headlines in the United States because of Donald Trump's sudden change on the issue of Ukraine. God, man, this has been so fascinating to me. I've never seen anything like it, where it's this kind of quick pivot where all of a sudden things that have been going on for the last 3 years, like unprovoked war of aggression, well, that's no longer said. Zelensky is a dictator. Zelensky would lose if he had elections. Like they're trashing him because they're trying to create this context for we need to end the war. He's an impediment to that. So we need to trash the impediment to ending the war. We can't go with the same language that we did before because that language prevents us from ending the war. Like all of the stuff is changing in relation to we are trying to end the war. The screaming headlines come out. Oh my God, if Donald Trump is abandoning Ukraine, what does it mean for Taiwan? There's several. Like for example, just random search, Trump, Taiwan. That's the search. Screaming headlines. Taiwan watches Trump undercut Ukraine, hoping it won't be next. Taiwan holds its breath as Trump turns on Ukraine. Trump abrupt change on U.S. policy on Ukraine raises questions about Taiwan. So their take is, well, Donald Trump is abandoning Ukraine. And because he's abandoning Ukraine, he may also abandon Taiwan to the Chinese. No, that is fascinating. That is fascinating. That's like abandoning Hawaii. Give me your take on just their response in regards to the way they're treating Taiwan as if it's not part of China, and as if the one China policy is not U.S. framing of the one China policy, unless something has changed, which they have not articulated to change yet. But the headlines suggest something otherwise. It's just fascinating. Give me your take on this.
Well, Jamal, there's dual messaging going on. On the one hand, they have removed language from the State Department fact sheet saying that they do not support Taiwan independence. In other words, you guys go ahead, do your worst, declare independence if you want to. So there's some very, very, subtle messaging. At the same time, the fact that they're cutting and running from Ukraine sends the message to, the people on Taiwan Island that this is what's in store for them next, that the U.S. is simply weaponizing and using them as they used Ukraine itself. So there is some real double messaging going on. But as I said before, the cutting and running out of Ukraine is actually designed to consolidate forces so that they can go and accelerate escalate to war against China over Taiwan. And so it's a pivot out of Ukraine into
Taiwan.
Pacific, right?
Do you really believe, though, that every war game that they've ever had against China, we lost? The Department of Defense knows this because they would have to fight that war. This is not, 1825. We're talking about the aircraft carriers, which are infinitely vulnerable to long-range missiles. China is effectively an island in the way that it would be fought. Are they really, do you really think, and does China really think that these guys are preparing for war or do you think they're using Taiwan in a similar way as a bargaining chip? Believe, like, how can I say this? If you were in the United States, I'll give it this way. Every country has something similar to it. Slavery, Jim Crow, racism, those type of things are red lines. And you would even have white people feel some kind of way if they see overt racism taking place in their presence. It is not uniquely American, but that specific black-white thing is uniquely American. Every country has their own thing. We get it on a gut level in a way that other countries may not necessarily get that particular issue. Taiwan is that way for China. But it's possible that the US doesn't quite get that, or at the very least, Trump doesn't quite get that. Do you think that Taiwan is a bargaining chip? That it's not that Trump wants to go to war, that all things being equal, Trump realizes the horse is out the barn. We need to somehow contain China because we want to be, hegemon of the world. God made it that way. And because God made it that way, that we must be hegemon or the world must go to shit otherwise, that Taiwan is just a bargaining chip that he's willing to inflame, use, threaten, all of those things in order to get China to do something. I don't know what that something is. I hope you get my point, that the goal of it is not necessarily war in and of itself. The goal of it is some kind of concession. How do you, what do you think about that point of view or that take?
It's possible, Jamal. And, like I said, the Trump administration is not a single entity. There are different factions inside it. There's Hegseth and Rubio, etc. Neocons, they want war with China. For them, Russia was the appetizer on the war to China. China was the main dish. And that has been a constant for all of the neocons. It's been a constant since 2008. Essentially, China is the big target. China is the big threat. We have to destroy China. And there was a slight, debate. Do we go through Russia on our way to China, or do we knock out China first and then knock out Russia afterwards? In other words, is Russia an appetizer or is it dessert? That was the question for the Biden administration and the Trump administration. Under the Biden administration, the appetizer theorists won out. This was the Nuland faction, because they have strong attachments to Ukraine. They're very invested in that. And so they decided that they were going to knock Russia out first, because Russia is just a gas station with nukes, right? I mean, how could it even, put up a fight, right? It was it was a Potemkin state just waiting to collapse. And then that turned out not to be true. And by doing that, they drove Russia and China closer together, even closer than they already were, which is kind of going against the cardinal rule of geopolitics since Kissinger enunciated in the 1980s. So having driven Russia and China together, there's a certain analysis which says that what Trump is trying to do is he's making nice with Russia, he's abandoning Ukraine, and he's trying to do a reverse Kissinger, that is, pull Russia away from China rather than drive them together, which is what Biden did. That's one viewpoint. Another viewpoint, and I think there's an argument for this, is that Trump is simply diversifying. That is to say, he's creating, as Pete Hegseth refers to it explicitly, a division of labor, that they're deliberately building on their different strengths, and that Europe is going to pin down Russia, and it's on Europe's responsibility to continue taking the fight to Russia. And in the meantime, the United States will focus on the Pacific, on China. And so this is a kind of division of labor theory, right?
That's so cynical. Oh, that's so cynical. Look, you might not be wrong.
I mean, this is what they're saying. This is literally what they're saying. You can, hear Pete Hegseth. He talks about
I don't
comparative advantage and division of labor in this, global war. So that's one viewpoint. But there are always subtleties inside this. And one of the things to understand is, as I said before, Trump does not want war with a superpower, because he himself does not like losing, and he understands that waging war with China would be a losing proposition. As you pointed out, all the war games, point that out very, very clearly. Trump is not anti-war, but he is anti-losing war. He hates losers. He hated John McCain and anybody who was associated with him. So that's the piece that he does not want. And that is a potential mitigating factor, which then lets us ask, then will Trump keep this contestation just on the level of economic warfare? If that is the case, economic warfare, tech warfare, then eventually that will be a good thing, because the global South will arise and the US will essentially be forced to come to grips with the diminishment of its empire. Already it seems to be doing that a little bit, because seems to be working on the little empire rather than the big empire, rather than the global empire, right? But, and this is the big but, as I said, there are neocons that are very influential inside of Trump's administration. I'm talking about Hegseth, I'm talking about, Rubio, I'm talking about the CIA director, I'm also talking about the incoming Undersecretary of Defense. And these people really believe that Taiwan, quote unquote, should be independent. I believe that they're going to encourage that. There are already legislative measures that have already set that into place. The Taiwan Enhanced Resiliency Act was originally named, a law to support the independence of Taiwan. So the legislative train has already left. The House is being moved on a flatbed car towards war. And then you ask the $64,000 question: how do they think they can win the war?
Right.
It's insanity, right? It is insanity.
I mean, by the way, even if I'm Taiwanese, like if I am living in Taiwan and I'm looking at what's happening to Ukraine, and I think to myself, China has 1.5 billion people. We're a little island. We're going to lose. Like, I cannot wrap my head around the politics of independence in this way. And I don't live there, so fair enough, right?
Well, I mean, the first thing, Jamal, is it's not about independence at all, right? Because what they call Taiwan independence is simply further U.S. colonization of Taiwan. Taiwan has always been used as a U.S. base, an unsinkable aircraft carrier. From the period from 1972, 1979 until 2015 or so, it was used as a hedge against China. So the U.S. was kind of playing this kind of gray zone, game where it was pretending that it wasn't, but it really was a para-colony. And then after 2016, it came back into being a U.S. colony again. And the U.S. has been weaponizing it, Ukrainizing it, turning it into an arms depot and essentially a staging zone for war against China. That is its main role. Now, how do the Taiwanese think? They hate it. They want nothing to do with it. The vast majority of people on Taiwan Island want to keep their current status quo. But the U.S. Quisling DPP, which is in power now, and it's been in power since, the previous administration and et cetera, they have very, very close ties to the U.S. deep state. I mean, Louise Chow, the vice president, was an American citizen. She was a kind of darling in the U.S. neocon circuit. And so they have their claws deeply inside of the ruling party and the government administration. So once again, it comes back to the question, what makes them think that they can win this war? And to understand that, you have to go back to this notion of offsets that was most clearly enunciated by an organization, a deep state think tank called CNAS, Center for New American Security. CNAS, that New American Security, is a near-rhyming analog of Project for a New American Century. Center for New American Security, Project for a New American century. They're essentially a descendant of the PNAC project. And CNAS has gamed out excessively and in incredible detail how they want to take the war to China. And they've mapped out, they mapped out a 100-point plan, different kinds of hybrid warfare. But the other thing they mapped out is something called the third offset. Okay, the offsets are a game of rock, paper, scissors in war doctrine, right? Rock defeats scissors,
Right.
And cloth defeats rock. Well,
Everybody can be defeated, but it's the mix-up that makes the difference in whether or not you win that individual contest or not.
yeah, the first offset was what the United States had against the Soviet Union, which is mass. We just have bigger bombs. We have a bigger bomb than you, and we can destroy you. You may have massed conventional forces along the border, but we simply have more mass. We have a bigger bomb than you. That is the first offset. It's the first technological offset against an asymmetrical disadvantage. But this didn't last because the Soviet Union built its own bomb very rapidly.
Right.
So then the US shifted to the second offset. What is the second offset? The second offset is precision. And that's the notion that we have precision guided munitions that can knock your missiles out of the air or off their launchers before they can even be before they can do anything to us.
Yeah.
And this was the entire generation of smart bombs and cruise missiles, etc. That's characterized by, if mass is characterized by the atomic bomb or the nuclear weapons, precision is characterized by the cruise missile. So we have cruise missiles. Okay. Now, in the case of China, China has an incredible panoply of missiles that they can use to defend their territory and their littoral waters. The Dongfeng class, 25, 26, all of these things are essentially China's precision defense against U.S. encroachment, U.S. offense against it. Okay. So then what they developed was something called the third offset. So if the first offset is mass, the second offset is precision. What do you think the third offset is?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's not
third
hypersonics. It's not nuclear. I mean, nuclear kills everybody. I mean,
Third offset-
we're talking about a war. We're talking about something we need to win.
The third offset is diffusion, dispersion, distribution of forces. So if you have your opponent who can attack you in a precise way, in incredibly pinpoint way, what you want to do is you want to diffuse your forces and so overwhelm them. And so this is why the US has been training on island hopping across all of the islands of the first island chain. They're literally, packing the entire island chain with forces that can move rapidly from island to island, scoot and shoot, etc. And once you have that, then they believe that they can overcome China's defensive capacity. They call it A2AD, anti-access area defense. It just means China has the capacity to defend itself. But it sounds weird if you think that you're trying to overcome China's defensive capacities. So they say we're going to overcome China's A2AD capacities. The primary weapon that signifies the third offset is the networked drone. That is drone swarming. If you have swarms of drones, then regardless of your precision, you can simply overwhelm with swarms of drones. And so this is why the US is working on, for example, with Anduril and others, the replicator project. They plan to create tens, hundreds of thousands of cheap missiles and deadly drones. And another piece of the third offset is automation. That is AI-driven warfare. So that is in the works right now. That's the work of, Anduril and Palantir and all these other companies that are, whose stock is, has gone up, 500%. They're preparing for war with China using automation and diffusion and subsurface and long range standoff, etc. This is the third offset. So there is a sector of the US deep state, primarily centered around CNAS and a few other think tanks, that believes that they can win a war with China. And there is one more piece. There's one more piece that they have lined up, which is, it's essentially an open secret. And that is they're going to use nukes. They're going to nuke China. Okay, they're preparing tactical nukes, and they're arguing that the spectrum of war from conventional to nuclear simply doesn't exist anymore. It's simply just one long continuum, and we're going to use nuclear weapons. The US has planned this out for a long time. Right now, it's essentially doctrine. And so
See, therein lies the rub, KJ. The moment that, like, if you and I are in a contest and both of us die in that contest, then you don't win that contest. Like, winning a war is winning a war. It means that even if you have one man standing, there's one man standing that the opposition doesn't have. It's a pure victory in that sense. But at the very least, you have somebody standing there that says, I won this war, I'm still here. A nuclear war doesn't do that. Both lose.
Jamal, there are two theories around nuclear war. And one theory is what is called counter force, and the other is called counter value. Counter value is known as MAD, mutual assured destruction.
Right.
You knock out our cities, we knock out yours. Essentially, we all die. That was traditional nuclear doctrine. Starting around the 1980s, the US started to develop a nuclear doctrine called counter force. And counter force is also sometimes referred to as NUTS, N-U-T-S. But essentially, the theory is that we can win a nuclear war if we get a sucker punch. If we get
if we can hit our opponent.
If we can hit our opponent first, fast enough, then we win. And we may have, 10, 20% destruction of our cities, but we can live with that. We're billionaires. We'll just go into our caves and have good lives until, the radiation dissipates. But there is currently, the US nuclear doctrine is largely based on counterforce. In other words, nuclear first strike. In other words, a nuclear sucker punch. And that's why they believe they can get away with it. And they believe that tactical nuclear weapons should and can be part of an ordinary spectrum of war. This is what
These people are sociopaths.
They are sociopaths. I mean, Michelle Flournoy, who founded CNAS along with Kurt Campbell, she said, when we go to war, we're going to knock out all of China's ships out of the water, blast them out of the water in 72 hours. Now, that's insane. That's not possible unless you're talking about something like tactical nuclear weapons.
KJ, man, I always appreciate these conversations. This was a terrifying one. I'll put it on that one, but informed. And I thank you for it. I really do. KJ, no, he's a political analyst, writer, teacher, specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. KJ, where can people find you?
They can find me on the China Report and also on various progressive websites, Counterpunch, MR Online, Black Agenda Report, LA Progressive, Popular Resistance, etc.
Very cool, man. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. Be safe, KJ.
Thank you.
All right. We have come to the end of the show. Let's go into the chats. Let's see, Mr. Riffley. Hunter Biden was useful because he was compromised. The Ukrainian criminal element could trust him. The Democrats used him in an operation to provoke Russia. See, I don't think they used him in an operation to provoke Russia. I think I mentioned this earlier. I think Hunter Biden was a grifter. And I think he had the luxury of having a dad who just so happened to be VP. Ukraine, rational actors in that case, were like, hey, how do we get closer to the U.S. government and the largesse of that government? How do we influence the political situation in America? Oh, I know. Let me hire the vice president's kid. No, he doesn't know anything about oil and gas. No, he doesn't know anything about Ukraine. But his last name is Biden. That's what we need. the last name being Biden. And so you give him an office, you give him $80,000 a month, and he sits there and shuts the hell up until the point where you need to have a conversation with Joe Biden in some way. I think they were effectively using him as a gateway to Biden. That's my take. I could be wrong on that, but that's my take. Jabari, VOC Media, Zelensky should move to Florida with all the other puppets. What did they say? He should move to France? Is that what somebody, it was leaked that the Trump administration was like, hey, that guy should move to France. Luigi Maggione did nothing wrong. RJ Raymond. Well, he is in a courtroom and they're going to make that choice on whether he's the guy. Apparently, there's a lot of stuff that's been bubbling up that, let's say, adds questions to whether or not they got the right person or whether or not all of the legal loopholes were followed, if that makes sense. We'll see. He is considered a hero. I'll give you that. But I think Caleb Maupin is right. Killing that guy didn't change anything. They put another cog in the wheel and the whole system keeps going. Sir Bikes a lot. I heard Amtrak train horn in the background. Music to my ears, music to my loving ears. Richard, always a great show. Thank you so much. Oh, Richard, man, thank you for watching. Look, I want to ask all of you, like it, share it, subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to grow. I want to hit 40K. No, I wasn't able to get it before the end of the year, but eventually we'll get there. I want to thank all of you. You can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships. All of those things allow this content to be what this content is. And you have my deepest appreciation for caring enough to donate in that way. Yeah, I'm heartened by it. I really am. We have one more before I close. So Bikes a lot. I heard, that was the one. All right. I'm going to say like this show, share this show, and subscribe to it. You guys have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show episode, what is this, 102?